and welcome to Salty Runback. Here to be your weekly intake, or now daily intake. We're kind of doing this bi-weekly now at this point, of North American Developmental League of Legends. For those of you joining us from the reveal show, welcome. This is Salty Runback. This is an NACL and NACLQ podcast hosted by myself and Hawk over here. And we're about to talk about all of the incredible things that just were revealed to all of you in the chat and all of you watching at home. If you are catching up on this via VOD, don't worry. We will be keeping things up with you as we go along. But first of all, got to introduce my constant co-host, Ben Hawkins. Hawk, how are you doing on
Grapes,
this lovely Thursday night?
Grapes, I'm doing absolutely amazing. I've had a beautiful day, mostly dedicated to League of Legends, researching all the teams for selection committee. We were both on that. That was an interesting experience. I know you were on it last split, but this was my first time on the selection committee, and I'm so excited now to react to all the teams, the fruits of our labor, if you will. We've got the 32 teams all selected, all ready to go, and I mean, I think the sooner the better. We got to start giving the people what they want. Some hot takes, Grapes.
Exactly. That's kind of the point of the show. We talk about things and we give our own opinions about them. Sometimes they're right, sometimes we're wrong. It's only been 2 weeks into the season or 2 episodes in, so we haven't really been proven wrong on many of our opinions
That's
on
that's
things
the
yet.
logic I like to
But
hear right
But
there.
the magical part about the open qualifiers is that everything takes place over 2 days. If you are joining from the LCS raid that happened on Summer's channel, you might not be completely caught up to date on what is going on here with the North American Challengers League open qualifiers. Well, there are this is the league below the NACL, or what we formerly called Academy. And basically it's open qualifiers. Anybody can sign up to join any sort of roster that they want. And basically, what happens is that a committee of around 10 to 14 people who are both casters, coaches, and players in the scene seeded the teams 1 through 32 through a process that we'll get into a little bit later. And these 32 teams will play in a 5-round Swiss bracket open qualifier this Saturday and Sunday. And those teams will duke it out over the next 2 days. And how this ends up working is that if you have 3 wins, you're in to the next round, the GSL group stage. If you're out, sorry, you got to try again in a couple of weeks when the next tournament ends up going around. Once we are in the round of 16, we will play a group stage GSL style into a best of 3 knockout stage with 8 teams in the quarterfinals, then the semifinals, and then the finals. We'll repeat this process twice, as we mentioned before, until finally the top 4 teams that have earned the most qualification points, which you get by high placements throughout these events, will move on to the promotion relegation tournament, which will be where those top 4 teams in the NACLQ will play against the bottom 4 teams in the NACL at the provisional level. So teams like FlyFam, CLG Faith, those guys are all on the table for the potential promotion relegation tournament, and they will be playing as the top teams in amateur to see who will make it into the NACL next split, in that summer split. So a lot on the line here, Hawk. Which is
Yeah.
why this selection committee process was very important and why we're super excited to get into the open qualifiers.
Yeah, Grapes. Wow. First of all, I'm really impressed with how great that explanation was. That was a lot of
Yeah.
information. But for anyone that was like, oh, that was a lot to take in, basically, the 32 teams that were revealed tonight, they're playing in a best of 5 out of hell to try to determine their tournament lives. That's sort of the lowdown with all that Swiss bracket and everything. But it is a really big deal for these teams. And the seeding is really important because it directly factors in to which teams will be playing against each other. And Grapes, I mean, we've got the format out of the way. Should we just pull up the seeds and start dropping a few takes?
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. Let's pull up the teams. Of course, if you were watching the reveal show, which I think most of you were, you already have kind of gotten access to the list and kind of some of the thought process and some of the players that these teams are on. But right off the bat, Hawk, anything catch your eye here in terms of teams that interest you in terms of the way that they're ranked and maybe some of the players that are on those teams?
Well, Grapes. So, I mean, off the bat, we did our episode that premiered last night, our second episode that was pre-recorded, and we recorded on Tuesday, and we were talking about a bunch of players that we were like, oh, we were worried, we hadn't seen them get on teams yet, we don't know what they're gonna do, and then Tony Top comes in on a team with Iconic, and they just get third seed, like off the bat. And we had no idea that this team was coming. And so this, Duyin Tony Top. I don't really know how to pronounce that, but they are all of a sudden here to play, and they're looking to be one of our top contenders in the NACLQ off the bat. And this was one that I honestly wasn't really expecting. And Grapes, I don't know if you feel the same way.
Yeah, I mean, there was no announcement about this team. It was just kind of seemingly a pickup squad of really good players
Yeah.
that came together and formed basically a super team. I mean, you
Yeah.
have Tony Top on the team. We want to go through the roster really quick. Tony Top, Iconic, Sudsy, Levitate, and Snow 2. So Levitate and Snow 2, some newer players. Levitate was on the University of Southern California CLO team in 2022. And Snow 2, I think, bounced around some wild card organizations and kind of has been a developmental piece for the past couple of years. And then you combine that with literally one LCS player in Iconic, a player that should be in academy right now in Tony Top, and Sudsy, who is at the top of the table in amateur over the past couple of years.
Yeah.
So this is definitely a really exciting roster that we definitely did not see coming in that last episode of Salty Runback.
In Grapes, usually I feel like there's always like the two classes of OQ teams, right? There's like the established orgs, right? You know, we got Team Fish Taco up there at the top, Maryville University, Supernova, like all those kind of teams, the established orgs, and then we've sort of got the Five Friends teams. And usually I feel like the Five Friends teams aren't necessarily this high, but we always get a few. You know, last year we had like Bogged. They were really, really highly seeded as well. And this time around, I do feel like this Tony Top team is that big Five Friends team at the top of the table. But Grapes, I mean, sort of looking down the line, another thing that stuck out to me too, I feel like a lot of collegiate teams here in the 32 open qualifier teams looking to make their stamp. I mean, again, I mentioned Maryville, Winthrop, ISU, some usual suspects there, but we've also got, for example, St. Clair College. I don't think they were really contending in the OQs last year. As well as Northwood University's team is they're playing under a different name at this tournament. They're playing under the name oh Grapes, help me out. Godel Gamers, I believe that's that one. Or no.
So yes, I just counted everything up to save you a little bit
Okay,
because
yeah,
I know
go
you're
for it.
trying to scramble a little bit. There are 10 collegiate teams
Boom.
in the top 32. That is Maryville, St. Trevor, who's technically St. Thomas, Winthrop, UCI, third party SSFW, which is Northwood,
Right there you
Redbird
go.
Esports, and then we take a look down in the bottom 16. We have St. Clair, we have Vespa, who is Virginia Tech, and then we also have U of T and UC San Diego. I might have missed one of them in there throughout the reading, but I'm 90% sure that counting everything out, 10 out of the 32 teams is part of the collegiate system. So that's going to be
Right.
pretty exciting. And I think actually maybe the last thing we touch upon, just based off of some of the general placements before we get a little bit more into the weeds with some of these specific teams, is when I was ranking the teams, because spoiler alert, Hawk and I were on the selection committee. You'll be hearing some about our takes in a little bit. I thought the hardest group of teams to rank was around the nine, maybe like top six or top six, top eight, relatively easy to like organize. But then 9 through around 20, that's when things got
Yep.
really challenging for me.
Yeah. Everyone sort of had the same like top 8, maybe just reordered a bit, but like generally the same teams all in that group. But things definitely got more contentious as it went down, and it made for some interesting things. And especially, I mean, for those middle of the pack teams too, those are the ones that you have to think are really going to be fighting to find that coveted 3-2, because of course only half the teams get through right here. So if you're not able to find those 3 wins, if you're not able to pull out, at least one upset or at least
Right.
one big win, if you're one of these mid-table teams, Grapes, it can be really, really hard to move on. And that is what makes the Swiss format, I think it's fair to say, a little bit unforgiving, but also very fun to watch for the viewer, because it feels
I
like a mini March Madness happening all at once.
I said this last week, but the open qualifiers is always one of my favorite things to watch in these whether it was Proving Ground Circuit qualifier last year or NACL qualifiers this year. Just like the sheer amount of stakes that are at every
Yeah,
single game is really exciting. And there's going to be so many games going on at the same time. It's kind of like when March Madness happens in
exactly.
college basketball, and you're like, in your class watching through like all the different games. You have your bracket up on the other half of your screen, making sure that like you're not getting killed by your friends in any way. And then you're just watching some random 14 seed just upset, and it changes the landscape of the entire tournament. That is what the
Yeah,
OQs are happening in, but like times 10, because you get the first round like 5 times over 2 days, which is always the most exciting part.
yeah.
But uh, if you don't have anything else to add, Hawk, because I want to make sure that you have any last points about the 32 teams that are up here. I think it's about time to go over to the amateur selection committee, who helped decide the rankings for all of these teams. Now, as you can pull that spreadsheet up right now, these are the full uh, seedings that that all the members of the selection committee went to, and you can see their names as well as where they placed each of the teams. The teams are in order of how the final seating ended up working out, but basically, the people at Rally Cry took the average rank basically of each team, divided by the number of committee members, and basically just ordered it in that way. So you can see here that Team Fish Taco average seed was 1.27, because some people, me and Hawk included, actually put them at 2. But an interesting thing to note as well was, before this, there were a couple of other situations that had to kind of get settled, because, Hawk, there weren't actually 32 teams that signed up for this qualifier. There were actually a little bit more than that.
Yeah, there were more than 32 teams. So the first thing that we had to do with the selection committee was just select the bottom 8 teams, or I say the bottom 8 based on ELO. The top 24 teams automatically get in, and then everybody else, we have to select the next 8 to be a part of the open qualifier. And then once those 8 teams were selected, then we seed them based on 1 to 32. So, for example, one of the highest seeded teams here, University of St. Trevor at 8 seed, they were not in the top 24, but obviously they're at 8 seed because the selection committee rated them very highly,
Yeah.
aside from solo queue ranking. And Grapes, I mean, looking at this ranking, we were a bit of rebels with the Team Fish Taco thing, as you say. By and large, I think everything looks to be, not too abnormal. And if I'm not mistaken, this is a very similar, if not identical, system to what was used last summer. I know you were on
Right.
that committee. I don't know if you can attest to that.
Yeah.
Um, but
Um,
oh yeah, go ahead.
no, you finish your point. I'm sorry.
All I was gonna say is, it seems to be a very similar system. A lot of people seem to agree with how it worked at the last open qualifier, and now coming into this one, we've gone with the same sort of system. And I mean, I think personally it works really well. I just think it's a great idea to have this committee that sees the teams instead of it being purely based on arbitrary criteria. These are all very, very dedicated people in the scene, lots of general managers and broadcast talent for the most part. And yeah, Grapes, you have anything sort of just looking at this seating ballot that sticks out to you as shocking, maybe?
Yeah, I think the selection committee was a really important change that was made in the second half of the summer split last year. It allows for people to, you know, put in their good takes about teams and maybe some of the stronger opinions about stuff. But then at the end of the day, everything gets averaged out, and that's kind of where things are going. And also, we get to see a lot of different perspectives from a lot of different groups of people. So if you take a look at the number of people that were on the committee, you have broadcasters like myself, Hawk, Cubby at the NACL, and then Summer, as well as some other people who are very familiar, as well as some other casters who are very familiar with the amateur scene, like Random Minion Caster and Rebel Fox. And then you also have people that are coaches and managers of certain teams as well. So you have people like Demos and Myra, who are now actually managers of NACL teams, but still know a lot about the players in the
Yeah.
level below. And you also have managers and staff of teams that are currently competing as well. So Colomer of Native Gaming, Keelix of third parties, Super Sunshine, and kind of so on. But the good thing about that is that they are not allowed to rank their own team, because obviously that they'd be pretty biased. And also, if they were trying to finagle the system in any way to make sure that their team would be ranked maybe a little bit higher, well, all the ballots are public, so we can flame people on the spot. I'm taking a look right now to see if there's anybody that we can flame. Keelix has Native
Felix
Gaming
has
number
some hot
6.
takes. I'm gonna just say
Um,
it.
and again, last preface before we move on to the next section of the show, is that obviously some people have more access to scrims than other people, um, and obviously that really plays a big factor, because there definitely are teams that have players that not a lot of people know much about, and also but they just like have been smashing scrims, and that kind of is another nice good part about the point of the committee, was that we were allowed to kind of communicate with each other
Mhm.
and give each other our takes and thoughts about each of these. I know my initial ballot that I originally put together was very different than the one that I ended up
Yeah.
submitting, after talking to different people who have had different experiences, and had maybe a little bit more scrimbush, as the people in chat are kind of alluding to.
Rest assured that every single person on this committee got flamed for their initial ballot, like very heavily by everybody else on the committee. Everyone, but I mean, it is great. Everyone had such strong opinions about the teams, and I think that is part of the point. Is like it's good to get flamed and realize, challenge each other's logic, but also everyone on the committee was willing to stick to their guns as well and rate the teams how they would. And I think that is such an important part. And Grapes, again, just looking at the seating top to bottom, as much as it all evens out because of how the averages are taken, but B, you never really know, as we said, which games can end up mattering a lot, sort of in that March Madness style, right? With the
Right.
Swiss bracket, you never really know which games can matter a lot. I remember back in the spring, we were covering the OQs together as a caster duo, and we were covering No Name up against EGP. And we're like, who the heck are these No Name people? They're going to get stomped by EGP. And it ended up being one of the closest games of the OQ. And not only that, it decided their fate directly. EGP,
Yep.
by barely winning out in the game, clawed their way into group stage, and No Name unfortunately had to go home. But it's those kind of games that give players that we might not have expected platforms, and we get to spotlight them and see them play really well. And so that was one example of a cool thing to come out of that. But I do think that is the beauty of OQs. But I mean, Grape, speaking of flaming everyone for their ballot, though, maybe I can come back to our faces here. Speaking of flaming everybody for their ballots, I think we should bring in the expert on the numbers behind each ballot.
Well, definitely put a lot more work into statistics than we did. We got a very special addition to the show here, where we're going to be bringing on a guest, a beloved caster in the amateur slash semi-pro scene, random minion caster, joining us here for a very special segment. RMC, how are you doing?
I'm doing well for now. We'll see how I feel by the end of this. That said,
I won't flame you
Grapes
too
and
hard, I
Hawk-
promise.
Sure they weren't. Sure they weren't. Grapes and Hawk have brought me in as living proof that the committee will take any old random off the street. I made it on the committee and I voted in. So yeah, I'm glad to be here. And yeah, we're about to pull back the curtain a little bit and show you guys, a little bit about what happened with the committee here and how we were doing this.
Right. Well, so RMC, before we get into this a little bit more, obviously you have a ton of extensive knowledge about the amateur scene. You've been following Proving Grounds circuit qualifiers for the past, I think, like 2 or 3 years at this point. But then brought onto the committee. You were presented with this list of teams. If you want to describe kind of your experiences as being a member of this committee, and kind of what it was like to really be such a big factor in deciding the fates of all these players that you see.
I'm just glad there's 16 of us because, as Grapes and Hawk kind of pointed out, the more people, the better. It kind of averages out. So I know there are always going to be people upset about the seating, where you place, and all that. It is an average of 16 people, sort of knowledge about that, and there's a lot of discussion that goes on behind the scenes as well. Nobody has perfect knowledge of all 32 teams. I'll be the first one to admit that there are teams which I don't really know much about, especially towards the lower end of things. And there are people who do. So we kind of get together and we share that information. And so you're going to start seeing a lot of variance in sort of where teams get placed, and that kind of ends up the way it is here. So congrats to all 32 teams who made it. And sorry for those who thought they got seated lower. I think I saw Peter mentioning that I placed ISU ninth. What went wrong there? Congrats if you got placed higher than expected, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, I think RMC had ISU significantly higher than most people on the ballot. I mean, RMC, I think this is a great segue to the wonderful table you made. You wanna introduce us to this?
Okay, so you know what? I thought to make it easier for people to flame us, I would color code everything for you guys to flame us here. So this is a variance chart I sort of made here. Basic premise is pretty colors means big difference. The less colors there are, the closer they were. So you can kind of see, like, for example, Shonatonen in the top bit, he got, I think, all the top 8, 0 variance. He predicted it spot on from the average there. Red means that that person voted you lower than the average. You might see some big red marks. Kelix had some interesting ones. The brighter the green there, the higher we placed you over the sort of average. So Kelix also has some really big ones there. Vespa. And at the very bottom, you can see those numbers. That's the average variance. The bigger the number, the further we were from the average votes there, which, frankly, I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing. If you're right, you're going to look gigabrained, but well, a lot of people think you're wrong.
I feel like it's interesting because it's not necessarily that you're right or wrong, right? It's that you are the most aligned with the
Yeah.
general consensus of things. And if you take a look at it, I feel like I'm one of the higher like I'm closer to the generally not very controversial
You're
group of
You,
basic.
you're
people.
you're you're
You're
close to the
basic.
basic group, Grapes, I think is what you
Right.
meant to
Exactly.
say.
So I don't know if this means that I'm boring, if I'm a shill, if I'm a pushover, or if I'm just like really smart. So
No, so basically, like to sum up what RMC said, right? Like if your number is really red, you're a hater, and if your number is in green, you're a coper. Is basically like the
Hmm.
key here. But that also, so Grapes, you're the most basic here. But RMC, how does it feel to be the one with the hottest takes here as well at the 2.56?
At this table,
At
I'm
this
not even
At
table,
the
at this
talking.
table.
table, no one comes
Yeah,
close to
I'm not even
Keelix.
talking right now. Yeah, I don't know where Killix is coming from, and like you mentioned, some of these guys have access to scrim information as well. So scrim bucks coming into play a little bit here.
True.
And Killix being a manager probably knows a bit more about certain teams than we do here. That's it. I don't regret the fact that I've got higher variance. I know there are certain teams which probably going to play me quite a bit here, but I'm fine with that. Like again, this is why we have 16 of us to make sure we try and cut down on the outliers. That's it. I do think it's actually kind of interesting. Like you mentioned, Hawk earlier, sort of the top 8 teams, very little variance. The big variance started coming, like 9 down to about 27, 28. That's where we got a lot of variance to start coming through there, and you can see that from the pretty graph there, right? All the big pictures, all the big colors, pardon me, come
Yeah.
in the middle section there. So yeah, that was where we really had a bit of a tough time, sort of trying to figure out where everybody was gonna go.
I want to take a look at some of the maybe the hottest takes, and we
Yeah,
can
yeah.
maybe decide which one of them we really approve and which one of them we really don't. So, I guess the elephant in the room here, the biggest number is of course Super Sunshine Fruit Basket Warrior Manager slash Director at Northwood Esports Keelix. Vespa at -15, so they are ranked 26th. He seeded them 11th. Now, I'm gonna go say this right now. I'm a pretty big Vespa fan. I casted their games in CLOL last year. They had some really solid players. I believe Reg, who was the jungler on Large, is also on that team. So definitely not a bunch of players that don't have a ton of experience. My one concern about them though, and maybe you guys can maybe come in with, to back me up a little bit on this, is that when I was looking at their players, I don't think a lot of them are the same people that were on that original top 32 CLO roster. And also, they only made top 32. And so when you're comparing them to rosters like UCI, who hit top 8, UST, who actually won the whole thing, maybe not necessarily a roster that you would put as high. But obviously, Keelix does see something here. If any of you want to try to back him up, that would obviously be an interesting conversation as
I'm
well.
sorry.
Grapes.
I'm just gonna say,
Oh,
Grapes.
go
For
for
a
it.
fan, you rated them 3 lower than
I
average.
I like the school. I was a big fan of Reg. I think he was actually playing mid
Reach had a good
because he's a
personality.
because the way Vespa worked, me and Rebel Fox actually casted this series, and if we take a look at this, Rebel Fox actually also rated Vespa very low. He actually rated them last, so maybe the people that were casting a CLO series aren't actually the most favorable of them, despite them actually having a pretty respectable matchup against Buffalo, I believe. But anyway, some of their players are not on this team, if I am not mistaken. So um, that was kind of where I didn't put a lot of trust in them. But if any of you want to go to bat for Vespa, I don't know if any of you want
Look,
to go to bat to Vespa because we all see them very low.
great
But
Grapes. I'm definitely not gonna bat for Vespa. I'm sorry. I do like Reach a lot. I interviewed him in PGCQ. He was one of the only players I did a losers interview after they lost to, I think it was 100 next. And Reach was great to talk to. Really, really nice guy. So like Stan Reach, right? But I'm not here to bat for Vespa. I think it's actually insane. Not only is this a blazing hot take that Vespa is this high, but Vespa is ranked significantly higher than a lot of the other CLOL teams on this roster by Keelix.
right,
Like, look at what is it? UCI is all the way down at like 25 or something like that for Keelix. There's a big red 13 there, and quite a few of the other CLOL teams too are rated a lot lower. A red 6 for University of St. Trevor, which is just UST's like most of the CLOL winning roster. So I think it's really interesting that not only is Keelix high on Vespa, but also a lot lower on some of the other CLOL teams in this pool.
Yeah, and I think Helix is so high on them that he almost single-handedly moved them up one rank. Because putting him 15 places there, there's 16 of us.
Was
Divide 15 by 16. He's basically one full rank that he moved them up there. So, yeah, maybe there's something, I believe that scrim results speaking there for Helix. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
I believe in the chat. I don't want to leak anything too crazy, but I think he said something like along the lines of "we will see," in terms of
Yeah.
like we'll see about that when people like had different conversations.
Seemed
And
very
obviously we
confident.
want, yeah, and obviously we
Yeah.
want to respect
Yeah.
where all these people are coming from. They all have their own experiences. I have not watched as many scrims as Keelix or Myra or Pukar or any of these people have. So in terms of insider information, I basically had none. When it came to my ballot, I kind of went off of who I thought were good and like based off of experiences watching their games and both in amateur, collegiate, or whatever it was, as well as talking to some other people in
Yeah.
the committee and kind of feeling out some players that I didn't know super well. But this is not the Flame Killick show specifically. Are there any other hot takes that we want to take a look at here before we?
So Grapes on the show. Yeah, we'll give Keelix a break. But in all seriousness, too, by the way, I really do respect Keelix for having a different ballot and again sticking to their guns. That's cool. So shout out for that. But Vespa by and large wasn't the most hot commodity of a team, and instead of individual hot takes, there were quite a few teams on this list that people had a lot of differing opinions about. Some right off the top of my head, Grapes, in RMC is like, I know Godel Gamers, some people had them top 8, some people barely had them making top 16. They were one of the teams, especially at the top of the table, that had quite a bit of variance. And I'm curious, how did you all feel about this team? And Grapes, I think you have the rosters up in front of you. You want to read off this roster for everyone?
Well, sorry, I was trying to fix something on my end.
Are
What
you
team are we
good?
talking about?
You're good. I got it. So
Gamers.
Godel Gamers, right? Godel Gamers, very hot commodity amongst the committee. Lots of people had them rated in the higher teens. Some people had them rated top 8. This is the roster comprising of Last Trickster, Dave Mon Smalls, and Detro.
Right.
I'm just curious. I want to hear everyone's takes on sort of where some of these more contentious teams landed for the three of us.
I think the Trickster jungle pickup for Godel Gamer here is massive, right? That's one of the big upsides for this roster. Trickster, a massive carry. We've seen him perform before, and I think that's why teams or the council, the committee kind of put
The council. I like that.
Council. The committee. Some of us rated them really, really high because of members like Trickster here coming through. Detro as well in the support role, really mechanically strong player as well. I think the ones who ranked them a bit lower were more because they weren't as familiar with the mid and bot laner, Dave Mon and Smalls. So
Right.
they were not really sure where to place them, especially with the new patch coming in as well. There's big questions of, hey, bot lane is going to be really, really important. They're getting a buff as well. If your bot laner is not like a big name bot laner right now in the OQs, it feels like that's going to be a bit of a disadvantage. It's going to be hard to play through.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point because this team was really hard for me to rank. I actually had them like at one point 19th and at another
Yeah.
point like 9th. I kind of swap back and forth a lot between this team because they have a lot of people that I kind of am slightly confused about. So if we take a look at their roster, obviously people that have followed the scene know Trickster pretty well, and they know. Oh no, hold on. They know Trickster pretty well. They know Detro pretty well if you've been following Collegiate with UCI, of course. But the other players, maybe not as much. Davemont is a streamer. I think Summer alluded to that in the reveal show. So that's obviously an interesting pickup. I think probably we'll have Pike banned in a couple of games here and there. But the other two players, Last and Smalls, actually, were on a team last summer called -3. Now this team is pretty interesting because I think they were seeded 30th in the open qualifier.
They were
for the
low
NMG
wherever they
selection
were.
committee.
Oh, yeah.
And they actually ended up going 2 and 3 and had some pretty impressive results. I'm gonna pull up their match history right now just to double check. Yeah, so they beat Super Sunshine Fruit Basket Warriors in 28 minutes,
Taco.
and they beat Taco Gaming in 29 minutes. So that was one of the kind of highlights.
Taco
of
went on to win the whole
second
thing
day.
too, I think. Right?
Right.
Yeah.
Or they.
Yeah.
No, they were. Yes.
Summer 2.
No.
It's Summer 2. Summer
Yes,
2,
they
right?
won.
Yeah.
They won. They won the whole thing.
So they
After that.
-3 won the whole thing.
-3 did not win the whole thing, but they basically finished
Transitive
second place
properties, they
because
beat
they
the
beat.
champions.
Right, that's right. Yeah.
So I didn't watch. Gonna be completely honest, did not watch this team
No.
at all. They lost to No Org, so they actually had the most unlucky schedule ever because of seeding. They lost to AOE Esports, Taco Game. They beat Taco Gaming, and then they lost to 100 Next and No Org. So probably the hardest schedule that any team at Open Qualifier had to play, and they almost made it out. I remember that No Org series was like really that No Org game was pretty close until it wasn't, and that 100 Next game went about 35 minutes. And so last the smallest run on the team again. Don't really have too much information about how good they performed in those games, but that is something that I looked at and definitely bumped them up a little bit for me.
Yeah, that's definitely more than fair. I think I had out of everybody, I rated this team just a little bit lower. Grapes, I know you had them at, let's see, you had them at 8. RMC had them at 11. I had them at 13, so I did have them the lowest. And it was mostly because I actually think I agree. This team has some pretty, I think it's fair to say, underrated pieces compared to a lot of the teams in this pack. But I actually look at the ceiling of a lot of these players, at least what we've seen, and I'm not sure I'm convinced. I think some of the teams rated below them have players that have demonstrated a really high ceiling very recently. And I think Trickster is probably going to be the best player on this team. But even Trickster, I think, is a good jungler. But Trickster is a good jungler that's a lot about facilitating very strong laners. At least that's what he did on Fear in the summer. And so I'm wondering if in an environment where perhaps his laners might end up being a little bit weaker, if this team will actually sort of struggle to get off the ground. So that's sort of why I've rated Godel Gamers a little bit lower. But does anyone else have any more thoughts about this roster or any of the other rosters that were perhaps a bit more contentious amongst the committee before we move on to the tier list?
Just a note on Trickster. I mean, on Fear, back in PG summer, yes, he was very much facilitative, but he also did play with Taco Gaming in the UPL in fall as well, and there he was playing primarily carries. So I kind of like that look for Trickster here. I think that's what he actually did before Fear as well. So I think that potentially could be fine. He's very versatile as a jungler, so I think he'll slot right in, and I think that's why people were kind of rating Godel Gamers a little bit higher. Now, in terms of controversial teams, I think the other one that caught my eye was Chaotic Fusion coming in at 23rd seed here. There was a big spread on this one here, also because Chaotic Fusion announced just earlier this morning that they were dropping their AD carry due to issues, so they're going to swap that up, and I think that made things complicated for that particular roster in terms of where do we put them. They were already an unknown roster coming into this, with even more changes coming in. To me, they're a little bit of a wild card team. I think they might be able to pull some upsets, but I really don't know what to think about them right now.
Yeah, so their roster, Chaotic Fusion, if you guys are not 100% aware, are Decoy, Windcraftian, Detention. I don't remember who their changed ADC is because it is different on the page that I currently have.
Is it Rapid?
No, it is not Rapid.
Okay,
Hold
it's
on.
not
Oh,
This is why we don't do this live most of the time.
yeah,
Hold on.
they
Chaotic
told us.
Yeah, but this is
Um,
exactly
yeah.
why we had problems.
So
trying to
there,
figure out this.
we don't want to get too much
Carlson,
into
Carlson.
why this ended up happening. Carlson,
It's
yes,
Carlson.
and then I'm a newbie, so we didn't want to get too much into kind of the intricacies with everything. But basically, what happened is there's a new AD carry, and the AD carry in OPGG is like Diamond 2 or something. And I like Decoy, and I think Detention is a pretty promising piece as well. But that kind of the uncertainty around that roster was a reason why I ranked them pretty low.
Yeah, same here. I think they have some decent pieces, but again, even the decent pieces on this team, to be quite honest, I don't rate them super highly. I think they could be great players, given the right amount of time to grow. I just don't think they're at that level currently, and especially with the uncertainty surrounding this roster, I was also rating them pretty low. I actually rated them higher than Grapes.
Yep.
But RMC, you had them all the way down at 30. I'm just seeing. Wow. So not a believer in Chaotic Fusion.
Not the last minute change, and not with the Diamond AD carry. Like I said, I think bot lane is going to be huge in this coming patch.
That's
All
fair.
right, well, I think we gotta keep things rolling here on this show. RMC, unfortunately, we're gonna have to let you go pretty soon. But before we do you have any last hot takes as a member of the committee, or any exciting predictions for how these open qualifiers are gonna go?
I back ISU. I stand by my ranking of ISU. You get
right.
blamed for it, and I will post this as well on Twitter. So those who want to take a closer look at how everything panned out as well. That will be on my Twitter at randommcaster.
All right. Make sure to follow RMC Random Mcaster. You are doing some interesting stuff with the open qualifiers this weekend as well, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I'll be over on the Supernova channel covering that alongside Thousand Eyes, and that'll be at twitch.tv/GG_supernova_TV. It's a bit of a long name, but we'll be there, one of the top 8 sort of seeded teams.
All right, Supernova, one of the better teams here. We're gonna be talking about them and ISU in the coming minutes here as we get into the next section of our show. But RMC, thank you so much for having us on. Wish the
Thanks for
best
having
of
me.
luck in the open qualifiers.
Thanks, RMC. All
All
right,
right,
Grapes.
so yes, what's up?
It's now time.
What do we have? What do we have here?
I accidentally flashed it on Streamlight twice. I was trying to manually adjust RMC's audio level because I have both you and him on the same feed. I apologize for the audio issues. But Grapes, it is now time where we are going to try to predict the open qualifier results. Are you ready for this?
This is not going to go well, is it?
No.
So, if you're not familiar again with the format, basically what happens is that there are 80 games in 2 days. 16 games of Swiss every day. And we are going to try and predict all of the rankings of all the teams and how their records will go. I am not confident about this at all.
Yeah, neither am I, but I mean, it's just impossible. It's like trying to predict, again, we keep using the comparison March Madness. There are going to be 80 games of League of Legends that take place this weekend between all these 32 teams. It is just not possible to get everything right. Like, let's get that notion out of the window and I mean, I don't know. Like, I think we should just full send it, dive in, and see what we can come up with, right?
Okay, so how are we gonna do this? Are we gonna start at the bottom and then go up, or are we gonna go like kind of random around? If you want to just kind of randomize the teams, that would be an interesting way to do things as well. I
You
don't know. It's
know,
kind of up to you. You're in charge of the production here.
I'm in
So.
charge. Okay, you know what? Here's what I'm gonna do. I think we should start at an end. I think that'll make it a little bit easier for us than just throwing teams at the board, right? Do we want to go maybe from 32 all the way up to 1? See if we can seed them.
Yeah, that sounds good. That sounds
All right,
good.
cool. So we're gonna start all the way down then at number 32. Let me pull up my screenshot here. We've got UC San Diego Grapes. I guess the question is, do we think that UC San Diego is going 0-5?
Now this is really fun because we're gonna give one team a ton of motivation by sticking them in the 0-win category. And we're gonna be as accurate as possible in terms of the number of teams. I know that there's some math that you can maybe calculate like how different teams can get into different ways. Like maybe if like the 2 seed is at 3 wins, it's impossible for the 3 seed to be at 4 wins or something. I don't really know how that works. So basically what we're
We're
gonna
not
do
that smart.
is at the end of every Swiss format, there is 1 team with 5 wins, there are 5 teams with 4 wins, there are 3 teams with 10 wins, and then it kind of goes reverse as well for the other way around. So 10 teams with 2, 5 teams with 1. One team loses all 5 games of Swiss. So we're gonna try to figure out who that one is.
Now,
Is it UC San Diego, Hawk?
So Grapes, actually, I had a revelation as you were talking. Usually, we don't actually have a team that straight up loses 5 games. Usually, it's actually a team that mental booms after going like 0-3 and then they FF the rest of the tournament. So, honestly, do we think
pick
that
the team
UC
that is going
San
to
Diego
mental boom the most?
Yeah, is UC San Diego going to be the mental boomers? I legitimately think that's the criteria here. I don't know if you disagree with me.
I actually do agree with you a lot.
Yeah.
Because that makes a lot of sense.
So
Um,
I don't know. I don't know, man.
okay, so you want to try to do this? Actually, I feel like that's a little bit disrespectful, though. Just saying like this team is going to mental boom. But I will say that I don't think it's going to be a collegiate team. Because
I don't think so
that
either.
Those teams are going to be a little bit more organized. So I will put, if it's okay with you, I will stick UC San Diego in the 1-win category.
I'm down with that. I'm down with UCSD in the 1-win category. I think they could pick one up. Again, it might be on an FF. We don't really know. But I think UCSD, look, there's also something to be said. You know, a lot of us put them as our number 32. Obviously, they're at the number 32 spot on our tier list. But Grapes, I think you'll agree with me. UCSD, they are a collegiate team that has played together, so that could lead to something good. But anyway, moving on. We want to keep things moving. We don't want to take too long. We're going to go up to another collegiate team, number 31 seed, University of Toronto Esports. Grapes.
Yep. U of T. I am also relatively familiar with them because I covered them in CELO last year alongside Rebel Fox, who, by the way, giant UC San Diego fan as well. He actually ranked them at 26, not 32, which is very interesting. But I think the thing that kind of caused a lot of committee members to rank these two collegiate teams specifically relatively low is the fact that a lot of their players are different than the
Yeah.
CELO runs that they went on last
Yep.
year. Very similar situation to Vespa, another team that is ranked relatively low. So in terms of the roster for Toronto, it is Fortunate, Olton, Little Frosty, Hooing, and Amy. And the one player I definitely want to shout out here is Olton the jungler. Looked amazing throughout CELO. It played one of the best round of 32 matches I think in the history of the collegiate championships. If you guys look them up against the University of Michigan, and Olton was amazing in that series. I want to give a shout out to him. I hope he does well throughout the tournament. But the rest of the team don't know too much about. I know Little Frosty was on this team in 2021, then subbed in 22. But if you don't have any other thoughts, Hawk, I think we could stick this team in the 1-4 team as well.
Yep. I'm down with that. I think for the exact same reason as UCSD, maybe they perform a little bit better. Maybe they're a better team, but I think at the end of the day, they're not going to be the mental boomers, and I don't really see them contending up at the top. But Grapes, moving on. Number 30, Contingent Esports. Are we going to keep the 1-4 train rolling? Or, again, we do still have our 05 team on the board here to be seeded.
Okay, let's take a look. Contingent Esports. That is one of the teams actually that was ranked kind of in the middle of the pack in terms of solo queue, which is pretty interesting. They have iMain top lane, Mua, Benjamex, Bazb, and Admiral Potato. I don't know almost anything about these players except for Potato, and everything I've seen from Potato has not been super incredible in terms of teams that they have been on. So I'm not entirely sure here, Hawk. What do you think?
Grapes, I just wrote something on the tier list. Look, all I'm saying is I've got the same take as you. I don't really know much about a lot of this team. They were sort of rated highly, but there are always sort of these teams that crop up of some good-looking solo queue players, and then they don't really amount to much. And I could see them, if starting off at a rough start, maybe they're the ones that go 05. I don't know if you're with me on this.
It's a very, very interesting discussion, and I think that we could stick them there for now, and maybe if
All
there's a
right,
team that
we'll stick them there
goes
for
up a
now.
little bit later, maybe that's another discussion that we can have.
Right.
Next up, at 29, Lotus Exiles. They have Pablo, Doubtful, Klexo, Timeless, and Hexmith. Hawk, I know you have a couple things to say about this team.
Yeah, I mean, the main thing, Lotus Exiles, they do have some players that are recognizable, especially for anyone that followed UPL. I believe it was UPL Fall, if I'm not mistaken. It might have been Summer. Hexmist and Klexo actually performed pretty well. Now, Hexmist was a jungler in UPL. Now, role swap down to support, if I'm not mistaken. But Klexo, a mid laner that actually looked pretty good. So I do think there are some shining lights on this team, if you will. I'm not really sure what to expect from them outside of that, though, Grapes. And look, all I'm going to say as well is I think we learned this from episode 2. If anyone watched that, if you didn't, it's up on all of our platforms. But as with Contingent, I'm not afraid to be the villain here. And even though I like some of the parts of this Lotus roster, Grapes, do we see them getting more than one win?
I'm going to see. Let's take a look. So I actually ranked them pretty high
Did
compared
you?
to some of the other teams. I had Lotus at 24, I believe. Because I remember a lot of their players from Chili Mountain Wolves, which is a team that competed in 2021 and some of 2022. And I thought that overall, people like Klexo and Doubtful were not bad. And so I know that maybe we had our differences here a little bit, but I could potentially see this team also with some previous synergy going for 2 wins. Maybe like they're at 1-3 and then win a game at the end, but
Okay.
it's a possibility, I feel like.
You know what, Grapes? I was a doomer on Contingent. I'll subscribe to a little hopium on Lotus. How about that?
All right, cool. And also it's important to note that of course there's twice the amount of teams that finish with 2 wins than with 1 win, and same with 3 wins versus 4 wins. So if we're gonna lean a little bit towards one way or the other, it's better to stick them
True.
towards the middle
That's
than
math.
towards the extremes.
That is absolutely math. But Grapes, another one, number 28 seed, Sea Dogs. They are another one of those solo queue teams. I do believe, if I'm not mistaken, nobody in the committee knew who any of these players were.
Sea Dogs up here, Antcliff, Poochie, Zalt, Hub, and Tinmio. So this team, Hawk, was
Ooh.
the second highest in terms
They
of
were.
current solo queue rating. So how the committee worked was the top 24 teams were seeded in terms of solo queue, and then the bottom teams out of solo queue had to be handpicked into the committee to make it to the top 8.
And then after that, solo
And
queue ranking didn't matter necessarily, just for the record. But
right after that, the committee kind of just ranked them wherever they wanted. So being high solo queue got you in, but it did not necessarily get you high seeding. As we see here, Sea Dogs with the second highest solo queue ranks are pretty low, I believe, at 28. So it's interesting to see that. I don't know anything about these players. If anybody in the chat kind of wants to hype them up for us, like feel free. But yeah, I had them pretty low, I believe.
yeah, I have them pretty low as well. The only reason I rated them higher than some of the other teams on my ballot was just purely because of solo queue rank. Maybe they're good because part of the thing with solo queue rank is you got to remember it's like mid-January right now, or I guess end of January. So there's not a whole lot of information to go on, even in terms of solo queue. They might have grinded really hard, played a lot. Now they're sitting at the top of solo queue, but considering that no one on the committee knew really anything about these players, I'm not too inclined to rate them highly, Grapes.
Yeah, the solo queue obviously is a really interesting thing to kind of to stick in there, but 2 wins or 1 win. Is the solo queue gonna carry them to a second win?
Grapes, do you really think that
I
in
don't know.
in the open qualifiers of NACL they're gonna get carried by solo queue?
Well, Ancliff is also in our chat, so we don't want to flame them too hard potentially. But
Shout out
I think
for
I
being
think the
here.
1 win. I think the 1 win is fine for now. And then we can kind of move things on a little bit. And if we see some teams that we really are not as high on, maybe we can move
Yeah.
one of these
I,
teams
I'm
back
I'm
up.
willing to move this one. Also, just to answer the question in chat as well, first in solo queue rank was League of Extraordinary Monsters. Sea Dog was second. We'll get to League of Extraordinary Monsters in a little bit, but we'll stick Sea Dogs in 1 and 4 for now. And you got to remember, part of the thing with Swiss is someone's got to be here, no matter how good the team is. Like 5 teams are getting only 1 win. That's just a fact. So before you flame us too hard, that's math. Math is math, and I'm just telling you math.
Some of
But
us have to be up there, unfortunately.
yeah. All right, Grapes. I'm going to fight for this one. Number 27 seed, Omega Gaming, at least 2 wins.
Interesting. So
You rated them low.
I did rank them relatively low. Their roster, Omega Gaming, is Spencer, Zutter, Radar, Zev, and Special K. I know Radar. I think I know Zev and Special K as well. I don't remember exactly from which teams, but players that obviously have had different levels of success. Radar was on that Converse roster, but an interesting caveat: if you do look at the ballots that were released, this team I believe was one of the last ones in to the bracket to that round of 32, so to speak, in terms of teams that didn't make it off of solo queue, and I believe kind of barely got in off of just the committee voting them in.
Omega was voted on by everyone except for Cubby, so they were pretty convincingly in, but yeah, they were not unanimous for what that's worth.
Interesting, yes. And so for me, this team is basically Radar and 4 people that I don't know super well, and so I think that's why I kind of had them pretty low. But if you want to go to bat, go to bat.
Look, I'm gonna go to bat. First of all, you say only knowing Radar very well is a bad it's a bad thing. Radar is a fucking dog, dude. Like, I'm just gonna say it. This guy was on team. You're talking about Converse. He was also on Team Ambition Sussy, a team that very nearly made group stage in Summer 2 after being rated pretty low by the selection committee, and I think fairly so. But that was a team with Anticipation as well, who isn't really in the scene anymore. But like there were some pieces, but they mainly played around mid jungle. And Radar, I mean, look, Scary Jerry was the big piece of that Converse roster, I think it's fair to say. But Radar, in my opinion, was the number 2. I'm actually really high on Radar, and I think this bot lane as well. I have not seen very much of them, but they're good enough to contend where I could see this team at least contending at the top.
Also, I forgot about this. Shout out to Special K, who was on Redefy Esports in 2021. I casted some of their games. So if that means anything to anybody, but I'd be down to stick them at 2 because
2. I'll
I
take
think
2.
that this is a team with some kind of quality pieces potentially, and maybe that could be an interesting one. And
All
again, more people have to be in 2 wins than 1.
Yeah, I will accept for 2. I really think Omega could be one of those sort of surprise gatekeeper teams. I don't expect them to get 3 wins, but I think they could be a contender, Grapes.
All right, now let's move on to the next team here. If I can get everything up correctly. Do you want to name off for that next roster, Huck?
Yeah, it's gonna be Keelix's favorite coping team. Vespa is coming up right now, number 26 seed. Grapes.
All
As you
right.
said, mainly comprised of Virginia Tech players. What do we make of this?
We talked about Vespa a little bit, so I don't want to spend a lot of time on this
Yeah.
one. But overall, I think kind of the points that we made were Reg and then a couple players that we don't know too much about. And the solo queue ranks were were better than other people enough to qualify them into the top 24, but nothing super impressive. So I think right now I'm leaning towards potentially one win for
Yeah.
them.
I am too. I rated Vespa 29th on my ballot. I am not really sold on mostly a replaced collegiate roster. Obviously, again, maybe Keelix is just massive brain, but I'm also leaning towards one win Grapes.
Too scary Jerry in the chat. I believe that the seating sheets are in the Rally Cry Twitter page. I'm not 100% sure, but I believe that is where things are right now. Okay, so Vespa at one win. Of course, collegiate rosters can stick together and maybe have some existing synergy, so that could maybe be a position where we're not as confident in.
True.
But
Yeah.
that is going to round out, I believe, our no, we have one more
We
to
have
round out our
one
bottom
more,
eight.
1 and 4, and I have an
That's
opinion of who it is.
Yep, and that's Des Moines DMG, Solidified, Low Jazz, Samikin, Slurps, and Plez. This is Solidified, who has been a top laner on some pretty solid teams. And then basically the bottom four of AoE Soupy Time, an OQ team from last summer.
So I think Des Moines is not our 1 and 4 team, Grapes. I think this is a 2 and 3, and I think it's a team that's played together for a little bit. They did go 2 and 3 at the last OQ, and I think one of them was on NFF, so it's a little sus. But I think this is a team that actually could be a little bit better, and mainly I think they're not the team that I have in mind to be my last 1 and 4.
Interesting. I'm excited to see where you lie with that one. Yeah, I think maybe existing synergy probably just helps them out a little bit. So I'd be down to stick them into 2 and 3.
All right.
Are we crazy enough to go 3 and 2 with any of these teams though?
That's a
Bottom eight.
question.
I mean, there always is one, right?
The,
Or maybe
what
because
is? Could someone in
Large was
chat?
25,
Large
and
was
then
25. Oh, and
DK
York
was
Lions
32, and York was 30. So I feel like
30.
a lot of the time there are teams in that bottom half that do get in,
That
and
is
right now
true,
we don't have
man.
any of them. Is there? Obviously, it's hard to kind of predict, but if there was one team, who would it be?
Okay, all right. I'm gonna. I'll toss my hat towards. Ooh, I don't know. I feel like okay. Mine. It's Omega. I'm calling Omega, man. I think Omega's that team. I think they're those guys.
Yeah, I might go for Lotus potentially.
Lotus.
Shout out Camcom, who also is managing and casting all of
Okay,
their
yeah,
games
yeah.
as well.
Shout out
Show
Camcom.
for the
We
casters
like
every once
Camcom.
in a while. um, so yeah, I think it's again hard to kind of see where people are on this. I think also the um selection committee does mean that some variance is a little bit less hard to come by
Yeah,
instead of just one person ranking all of the teams, which is
but
why
but
potentially
as you said, at the
there are
last
more upset
OQ, Large was
cases.
25, and they were seated by the selection committee. So.
Yeah. Oh no, they were 22 actually, I
Oh,
think.
okay.
So it wasn't actually that egregious of a upset, so to speak, in terms of seating. And I remember there were definitely people at the committee that were battling for large, mainly because Inori was on the team and then he wasn't at the end of it. So
Right.
whatever. Let's see.
I
Moving on
forgot about
to
that.
our third quadrant, so to speak. Uh, 24 seed. That is Conviction Hawk.
I got them at 2 and 3 again. I think I actually like this team. I know you're not that high on them, but I think Nightstar could be pretty good. I believe that's that roster, right?
Yes.
And who else do I like on that team? I'm pulling up the rosters. There's so many tabs to be pulled up right now, y'all.
So this roster is Voxtrick, Ivan, Aojun, Nightstar,
Aljun, I
and Nuke.
think, yeah.
Aojun, Nightstar, Nukes. And also Tarzan as a sub. Take that
Right.
as you will, ladies and gentlemen.
A nice Champions Q sub right there, if I've ever seen
Uh,
one.
yeah, potentially. Nightstar is probably the most well-known name on this team. I think Ivan has also played a couple of times back and
Yeah.
forth in the amateur scene. I know Nightstar the best, and I think he's probably towards the middle, if not like
Yeah.
the bottom half in terms of 80 carries in this pool or So if that's like the player I know best, I'm not necessarily super high on them.
So I will say as well, I guess this might not be the most glowing review, but Aljun, I believe, is role swapped from support on, I don't remember what team they played for. It might have been Conviction, who was pretty good in UPL in either this last season or in the summer. So they also have some experience at a higher level. And I mean, when I say pretty good, I mean like top 8 in playoffs. I think they were on a good team. So for what that's worth, again, my main thing here, I don't think they're going to be a 3-2 team, but I have them higher than I have them higher than the 1-4 because my last 1-4 has not arrived yet.
Aljun was a mid laner of Cosmic Wolf in UPL Summer.
Oh, okay, there we go.
A team with also Cookie Crook, who we'll bring up soon, as well as Skyline, Coda, shout out from Ottawa. And yeah, so I think this is a 2-3 team as well. I'm excited. I'm very curious. You're holding out on a 1-4.
Well, I'm not holding out for much longer because this is our next team. What? Oh gosh. What's the name of the team?
Okay, so the official name at 24.
Chaotic Fusion.
Chaotic 23. Sorry, Chaotic Fusion. Okay,
That's my 1-4.
We've had some conversation about Chaotic Fusion with RMC earlier in the show. I again don't know too much. I think some other players are okay, but I think just like not having like a diamond ADC probably won't work out too well for them. We'll see how that ends up going.
Like I ranked them at 23 because I think that this team has some names, and based on like where some of the prospects lie in terms of how known they are, they deserve to be seated a little bit higher. But especially with the ADC issues, I see this one not working out. Graves, I don't know if you're with me.
I am obliged to believe that as well. Again, I feel like we're at the kind of the bottom half here where we don't know a lot of these players. We're about to get into some groups of people that we know pretty well.
And I feel like we'll have stronger opinions coming up too.
Yeah, and I feel like this is a good place to kind of switch gears to the conversation of like, oh, is this team actually somebody who we could consider making it into the top 16?
Yeah. Well, Grapes, do you think St. Clair College is going to make it into the top 16?
Don't make me do this. Okay, St. Clair College.
Come on, be the villain.
Really quickly. They are the 22 seed out of, I believe, California. And I'm looking for their roster right now. Ricky LaFleur, Maddie, Bakery Boy, Rockboom, and Bosk ETI. Now, we did get some information that St. Clair's mid laner is technically collegiate mid laner is currently an import, and so is unable to play in NACLQ. And so they are bringing in Bakery Boy, who is maybe not their primary mid laner, but this is a team that also went top 32 in CLOL last year. But the interesting thing about that, though, Hawk, is that instead of obviously some players are different, but I believe Maddie is a new addition to this roster, and I believe that is an upgrade over whoever junglers that they had there before, and they still have some pretty good players alongside Ricky LaFleur and Rockboom. So I'm interested to hear your takes on this.
Yeah, so Maddie played in 2021, I think for Supernova, was it? In the summer. Yeah. And I'm gonna be honest, I think Maddie struggled, I think it's fair to say, in PG that year. But
no, what are you talking about, man? Supernova 2021, those are my boys.
I know they're your boys.
They made Proving Grounds.
They did, and then they got blasted.
They beat CLG.
Look, they were good. My point is, yeah, they were... All right, they did beat CLG. They were pretty good, but I do think I was not super high on Maddie. But Maddie was also a very young player at the time, and in 2022, took a step back, away from the scene a little bit, and I think in the summer was subbing for a really high-profile team. I don't remember which one. Behind a good jungler. I might be
He was a sub on Taco Gaming.
Yeah.
Also played for Team Ambition in the summer split. It did not make it out.
But like, so Maddie has been a player that's sort of, I feel like, been on the up and up, and so I'm excited to see him come back for St. Clair. With that being said, Grapes, we should probably keep moving it along. Where are we dropping them?
Okay, so me and U-Hawk both seeded St. Clair at 21, but
just for the content?
No. No. 2 and 3.
Moving on. Moving on. We baited everyone in the chat. I'm so sorry.
Look, that might be a swap.
Grapes, if Maddie comes up and smurfs it and makes me look like a dumbass, I will be completely okay with it.
Maddie's the best Lilia player in North America. in solo queue was the best Lilia North American in
Okay,
solo
that's like a
queue
quantifiable fact. I thought you were like dropping like a big.
in 2021.
Okay.
Lilia not super meta right now, but always could whip it out. So, you know.
Hey yo. Now we've got the highest ranked solo queue team from the ballot League of Extraordinary Monsters. Grapes.
Cookie Crook, SRRA, Riversided, Viscera, and Pika Pika. Hawk, tell me a little bit about this team.
So Riversided is a player that has been knocking around the scene for a bit. Pretty decent mid laner. Oh geez, what teams were they on? It's all running together.
University of North America was the CLOL team that they
Right.
were on. Got blasted by Harrisburg in the first round and was not exciting. Was not great to watch. But I feel like Riverside has been kind of competing in these OQs
Mhm.
for a while. And it's looked okay. It's looked pretty good in some of the teams that he's on, and now
Yeah.
actually, um, might have a decent roster behind him.
Yeah, and I know Pika Pika as well is a high elo support that in the offseason was playing for a lot of teams combines, like a lot of bigger teams combines. Obviously didn't quite make the cut, but did have some decent games here and there. So there's some stuff to get excited about for this roster, and obviously they are the highest elo team. And yeah, it's early season, but there is something to be said for pretty much every player on this team being challenger, if I'm not mistaken. And Grapes, where do we want to put them?
I still stick him at 2 and 3. I think that St. Clair is a more enticing roster
Yeah, I
than these
agree.
guys. I definitely know that like Pika Pika has been around amateur for a while. Cookie Crook also has been on a couple of teams, but nobody specifically
Yeah.
competitive experience wise really sticks out. And obviously there's the situation of being high in solo queue early in the season kind of is more about grinding games than it is necessarily always being the
hmm
best. Although obviously you have to be skilled to get up here in the first place.
We
But
both
that is
had St. Clair higher than League of Extraordinary Monsters in our ballots too, for what that's worth.
so that's I think where we're gonna leave it. Again, still some room for change as we get a little bit higher up to Zenigma, the number 20 team.
Yeah, so Grapes, looking at our ballots, we by the way, again, like we think the same way so many times. We had a lot of teams that were really similar to each other. We both had Zenigma at 19, and just based off that, I think that means we're not super high on this roster. They might, getting into the teens means you can contest for that 3 and 2. This
So
Enigma roster. Oh, go ahead.
I'm actually very interested in this team, and I want to hear some of your thoughts. They have Cocoa Puffs, Dunks, Xiao Danny, Enthralled, and Cerulean. So I know Cerulean is about a 17-year-old support prospect who has been kind of bouncing around a couple of teams in UPL and stuff like that. Cocoa Puffs was on Wolfpack, I believe, in the spring split, and was streaming a lot of their scrims and stuff. But the big name in this bunch is obviously
Is
Dunks,
Dunks.
who was a sub for Jinx Kittens, a Kane player, and got gooed
Yeah,
in
I
the
was about to say, I
quarterfinal
think
stage.
Dunks was pretty instrumental in the rise of Goo for this this past split. No flame, just it's true. I casted that series, or I was on desk for that series, and he got gooed, man. Like it was pretty heinous what happened.
Got gooed,
He
yeah.
got gooed on. Like it's true.
He was sub on Jake Kittens
Yeah.
and also was in the native gaming tryouts for a day. Didn't look great in them, not gonna lie. Obviously, like there was a lot of very talented players in that pool, like Munchie, who we'll be discussing later. But Dunks is a very interesting player to me because he was obviously a sub on one of the better amateur teams, but haven't seen much outside of that from him. Also, he's very, very young. I believe he's 18 years old.
Oh, that's great. We always, I do think it's crazy. We call ourselves like the Zoomer duo of casters a lot of the time. I'm
We're
21,
old.
Grapes. You're what? You're 20 or something. I don't know.
I'm 21 as well,
Wow.
yeah.
Oh, right. Your birthday. I remember wishing you happy birthday. This is such a tangent.
Thank
Anyway,
you.
but point being, I think it's so funny we call ourselves the Zoomer duo casters, but in terms of player age in this OQ, we'd probably be like either very average or maybe even on the older end, which I just think is crazy how many young players there are, how
Yeah.
many really talented young players are in this OQ. But anyway, speaking of Zenigma and where we should rate them, I'm still keeping Zenigma at 2 and 3. I know it's probably a little boring, but Grapes, that's because I do think coming up after this, we have our first 3
Okay,
and 2.
I actually I'll buy in on this. I think that Zenigma is gonna be an interesting team. They're gonna
I
be.
think they're
My prediction
interesting.
is they will be in the
They're in the
bunch
mix. They're 2 and
for
2.
like they're going to be 2-2,
Yeah.
and they might have to play against a team with a little bit higher seeding, which might kind of screw them over in terms of getting into the next bracket. This next team, though, I'm very excited about.
I'm
Talk about this
excited
team.
too, and I'm actually really sad they're seated this low. Look, I like some of the players a lot on this roster. It's Zuby's Kittens coming in. They were
Not, by the way, GM'd by Colomer.
not
Somebody
GM'd
else
by Colomer.
whipped up that name, and really creative of them. Bravo.
Colomer was very shocked to find out that what this team's branding was when we saw the list of teams. But this is a team consisting of Uni13, Actor, JoJo's, Yumichi, and Wolverine, and Grapes. I think I speak for both of us when I say we're not too familiar with the solo laners, but Actor, Yumichi, and Wolverine, both of us, I think, really like these three players.
Yes. Let's talk about Actor first. From Supernova, very hyped prospect coming into the summer split. I feel like kind of never delivered on stage, but for a lot of the people who got to watch Actor in scrims, as Supernova did allow broadcast talent to kind of go in and watch some of their games, Actor looked really, really great.
Yeah.
The one issue I think is his communication skills, because he does not comm much with his team, at least as of the summer split. And that was kind of one of the big things that Zoo and Supernova were working on with him, but plays a lot of really great carry champions, things like Kane. He whipped out the Belveth a couple of times, and also just like had a couple of really good games, and a couple of really bad games where it seemed like he just got caught out a bunch. So I think this player is very, very interesting.
Yeah, Actor did feel a little flippy to me in the games that I saw. And I know that was also Supernova in particular. Zoo was really trying to instill this early game, little bit of a flippier style, and obviously it worked a lot of times. Supernova was generally pretty successful last year, but it also wasn't successful enough for them to make proving grounds in either split. So, it was a little flippy, but Actor does look like a player with a lot of individual talent. And I do wonder, Wolverine, a player with such strong opinions about how the game should be played. No, I'm serious. Like, Wolverine, we all probably follow him on Twitter. Wolverine has some
Very
strong takes, about the game. And I do actually wonder if this could be good for Actor's development. And paired alongside Yumichi, man. Yumichi, she is an ADC that I've actually been really excited about ever since we saw that no-name game, Grapes, because then I saw her in Team Ambition Combine going into the summer. I don't remember what team she was playing on in the summer, but she was like substitute for someone good. I don't know, but point being, ever since we saw that no-name game that I referenced earlier with Yumichi, I've seen her around the scene, and I think she's actually been pretty underrated. She and her support at the time, who I unfortunately don't remember who it was, gapped Sketch and Daption in lane like they did in that game.
It wasn't Clyde. It was
not Clyde. It was
another like collegiate support. I don't exactly
yeah.
know, but
I wish I remembered, but
my hot one of I don't know if it's a hot take or not, but I think Yumichi is might be like a top 10 AD carry.
I'm with you. I think Yumichi's great. I think this bot lane could be excellent, Graves.
I have not seen Wolverine play support competitively. Did play Soraka ADC against 100 Thieves next and won.
True.
So that's obviously something to potentially consider.
Wolverine's the Swiss Army knife of League of Legends.
Yes, exactly. Also, JoJo's is on this team. I don't know too much about them, but they're 17, born in 2006. So if we were feeling young at any point in time, Hawk, we can't do that anymore. This is their first team ever. 17-year-olds, first, just kind of barely eligible to participate in the NACLQ. And again, don't know too much about this player, but could be pretty exciting. And their top laner, I also don't know too much about, but I do see Diesel as their sub, and he's relatively solid. So if anything terrible happens in the top side, you could always maybe potentially swap in to kind of just hold down the fort a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. All right, Grapes, I'm throwing Zuby's Kittens in 3 and 2. Are you with me on this? We both had him seeded 14, which means we had him in our top half.
I'm starting to think this is just like a seeding teams, but I feel like it's not. Just like going off of our seeds, I do think Zuby's Kittens. If things kind of go wrong, they will go 1 and 4. But if things go right, I can see them 3 and 2. So I'm happy to stick them up there.
Yeah, I am too. Let's move on.
Mean, though, that we have to stick that we have to put somebody in the top 16 out at 2 and 3. So just keep that in mind as we go through the rest of this.
I didn't think about it that way.
I
know who it is. I know who it is.
Okay.
I think I know who it is. But Grapes, let's keep it moving here. We don't want to take too long with each team. CB Gaming is going to be in the next team. We also rated this team exactly the same. How are we feeling about this roster?
CB Gaming, Phenom X. Kisno, Nem9, Last Dance, Sandwich. Um, I think this team could be okay, but I feel like their ceiling is much lower than Zuby's Kitten, so
Yeah.
I'm happy to put them at 2 and 3.
Yeah, I agree. Honestly, I don't really have much else to say because I think you took the words right out of my mouth. This team seems pretty mid to me, in the least flamey way possible.
I feel like they have pieces that kind of have been solid in certain situations. I think Phenom X had some decent games. Nem9, obviously on AoE randoms. Last Dance and Sandwich have also played on some solid teams. I believe both of them alongside Phenom X, striking Vipers potentially at some point. And so I think it's an interesting team to stick in the 2 and 3 category. If things like go wrong with a bunch of other teams, they could potentially jump up to 3 and 2. But I feel like they're going to be relatively consistent, and that consistency will probably be at this level.
Yeah, that's more than fair. Okay, moving on. Now, number 17, we're almost into the top half. This is one I think we're gonna have disagreements about, Grapes. The Nameless.
Okay, let's talk about the nameless because I had this team ranked 8th at one point, and now I
Same.
had them ranked where are they
You
now?
had
I
them
think
at 16.
I
I had
moved
them
them
at
down to
11.
16 because I just kind of got I don't know if I got convinced or just changed my mind about some of these players, but let's go over the roster a little bit. We have Gibble, Dwong Pro, Scoon, Tomato, and Sword Blue. I feel like this team, like, really was one of the hardest ones to rank in my
Yes.
opinion. But let's talk about some of the players that we saw last year, Hawk.
Yeah, so Scoon was also on that large roster, if I'm not mistaken, as the mid laner, and was surprisingly very good. Like kind of came out of nowhere and was one of the best players on this team. Played a pretty supportive mid style. I think compared. I mean, they had some pop off games too, but in some of the games I saw, played a little bit more of a supportive mid style. And I do think alongside Duong Pro or Duong, who was the former jungler for UCI. We're also bringing in Sword Blue, the former support for Bay State, and Tomato. I think this leads to a pretty competent bot lane, a pretty competent mid lane, a pretty competent jungler. And I don't know as much about Gibble. I know they were around in 2020, I think it was. So some of the people in the committee knew more about him. Also seemed to be a pretty hype prospect. And I think across the board, this actually is a team that they could suck, honestly. I could see this team just not meshing and being bad, but also I think this team could be really, really good. And Grapes, I'm gonna vouch for this team for 4 wins.
4 wins.
4 wins.
Okay, let's get into this a little bit more because I am not entirely sure. Scoon, I thought looked pretty good. Member of Illinois Wesleyan University, had a very good Yone game against Wonder Thieves next, which obviously is always a very impressive thing to say. Sword Blue, have not seen him play much in amateur when he has played in PGCQ as a member of Bay State, which I think they were in one tournament. Was not super exciting. And I
They
feel like
made groups in one, and then they got out in OQs in the rest, I think.
I do know that Sword Blue finished like very high in solo queue at some points throughout the past couple of years. So that's always a very interesting topic to take a look at. Similar to Kim Down, another collegiate support that is now on Team Liquid Challengers. But Duong Pro, I think, and Scoon are going to make or break this roster. I think that if they have good synergy and can play well, it's going to be
Yeah.
a pretty good situation. I just don't know if like I don't know anything about Gibble. I heard that he was one of the weaker players out of Scouting Ground Circuit in 2020. Not that I was following the scene super heavily at the time. And then Tomato is a very interesting player to me because he's looked good. He looks very good when he's put in like when he's put in the best situation. But if he's a little bit behind, it just kind of didn't work well on Supernova. And I
Yeah.
feel like a lot of actors' plays were kind of towards bot, and when Tomato got ahead, it looked really good. And when Tomato didn't get ahead, that's when Supernova really started to falter a little bit against other bottom lanes.
Well, but for what it's worth, though, like I said, Scoon was willing to play a little bit more of a supportive style on large, so I could see this sort of being a team where it's about Scoon, Duong Pro, and Sword Blue sort of linking up as 3 to play for side lanes, and that could really benefit Tomato a lot. Obviously, as you said, I think this is really going to rely on how well Duong Pro and Scoon's synergy actually comes together, but I realize we only get to put 5 teams at 4 wins, so I'm going to rescind that statement, but I definitely think this is a 3-2 team, Graves.
Oh man, I mean, I'm looking at some of the teams that are higher. Like, are there any of these that you're really gonna stick at 2 and 3?
Yes.
Damn. Okay.
I mean,
I thought really I think if everything clicks, they could definitely make a push. I'm fine with putting them at 3 wins for now, but I'm a little bit concerned now. But this is where we get to talk about some of the teams that are really in consideration for some of these tough spots. So it's just exciting.
I think Nameless. I think the Nameless is honestly. I think they will be one of those gatekeeper teams, but I feel pretty strongly that this team could get 3 wins.
All right.
I look, I'm sorry to the teams above that I'm going to put down, but I do feel that there are 2 teams left in the top 16 that I do not believe will be able to find 3
All right.
wins.
Well, I'm interested in your take on this next team now. Then the Northern Front at number 16, heading into our top 16. The Northern Front was a very interesting team for me to rank as well.
Yeah.
They consist of Censored, Maniac, DNA, Good Shot, and Little Chip. I think relatively high of this roster, Hawk. I had them at I believe 13th, and you had them at 16th.
Yeah, so I said this in the selection committee chat. I said we were talking about how we wanted to rate Northern Front, and I said I think this looks like the most mid team in the bracket, so I'm going to rate them the most mid that I possibly can. Meaning that
I
I think they very easily could go 3-2 or 2-3.
So you have them at 2 and 3.
No, I had them at 6. I actually think this is a 3-2.
Okay, I think Northern Front is pretty good. I think that in terms of like calling them mid, I think is a little bit interesting because their players
Mid compared to the pack. Mid compared to the pack.
I mean, their players are very exciting. I think is something that's cool. Censored, who was on Dare, that crazy Dare team that
Yep, that is
went to
true.
Baron all the time. Maniac is a new player. He's basically been he's basically been a sub for a lot of different high level amateur teams like Team Fish Taco back in 2022. And hasn't really gotten the chance to start on a team, but has been relatively high solo queue, has been grinding out games. I know he had an interview with Izzy. Shout out to Izzy. About kind of just like his aspirations of going pro. So that's an interesting one to me. And DNA, I think, is going to be the difference maker here to get them kind of over that hump because he's a pretty exciting player. Was on Ginger Turmeric before they picked up Shrimps. If you guys do remember that back in the day. And Little Chip also was on Super Sunshine Fruit Basket Warrior. So this, I think, is a team that definitely could go places. I'm pretty definitively sticking them in 3 and 2 if that's all right with you.
I'm fine with 3-2. The last thing I'll say about this team before I move on is I basically the reason why I'm not sold on them, even though I do think they could go 3-2, is I think this is going to be a topside team, and their bot lane looks pretty weak, and I don't think their topside is good enough to out topside the other topside teams. That's sort of where I'm
Fair.
feeling about this team against some of the higher levels. I think they could definitely beat a lot of the teams seated below them, though, which is why I'm fine with putting them at 3-2 Graves.
Okay, sounds good. Let's bring it to our next team, Redbird. Now, this is a controversial one. I believe a
This
lot of
is a
people had him
controversial
high,
one.
a lot of people had him low. One of the higher variance teams here. It is Meslo, GFP, Drew Dozer, Disconnector, and Tempos, not Nausicaa. If you did not see, Nausicaa put out a disclaimer, a video on his Twitter where he explained that basically due to some of the new changes to Oceania and how they are now affiliated with Southeast Asia, that he is now technically not qualified to play in NACLQs, which is definitely very sad. I
It's a
think he's a
bummer.
pretty solid player. Shout out to Nausicaa. Hopefully things can get resolved and we can get you back into the scene as soon as possible. But um, ISU is a really interesting team to me, Hawk. This team, I feel like, kind of always comes in with some levels of hype, and then some people kind of doubt them a lot.
Yeah.
So I'm interested to hear your thoughts.
Look, first of all, this team is going to get a zillion ban for free every game because they have tempos. So that's they're
Oh,
basically playing against a team with 2 bans every game. That's one. But I think ISU's good. I think I actually had them rated pretty mid compared to everybody else. Some people had them top 10. And some people had them like at 20 and I had them at 12. So so I think I rated them pretty mid, but I think this team is really good. I like ISU. They last year, yeah, they came in with some hype in some tournaments and they didn't really make it happen, but they also came in and looked really great. I know in spring 2 last year, they pushed IMT AoE to 3 games, who was a team that was consistently great all year long. They made top 4 at every PGCQ and beat an academy team in both splits. Like, that's nothing to be sad about. And now they're coming in as well. I think that was back when Disconnector was playing top. They've got Meslo in
yep.
the top lane now, and Disconnector's back down in bot. And I think that's a huge upgrade for this team. Other than that, the team is the same. I think there's no reason that ISU should not actually be contending for top 8 Graves.
Interesting. I had them.
Contending,
I had them
contending for
relatively
top
high.
8.
I talked to a couple of people in the committee, and they basically said that a lot of their players are just kind of average. Which I think is fair. I mean, when you think of people like GFP, and Disconnector,
I mean, that's
not
fair.
necessarily like they're people that have just kind of only been associated with ISU. I feel like a lot of other collegiate players kind of can move on to different amateur teams and get signed to them. But in terms of some of the members on ISU, kind of just they're enrolled at the university, and so they've been playing together for a long time, and
Right.
obviously that's helpful. But when you're comparing somebody like Disconnector to even like Tomato, Good Boy, Sophus Sage, and some of the players that are a little bit higher up on this tier list, like that's definitely where you get,
That's
I
fair.
think, a little bit of a difference. Um,
But
I think
also the
Mezzo is
fact
the
that they
best. I
play
think the
together for so
Mezzo,
long, you know,
yeah,
that
I
counts for
think
something too.
I think Synergy will carry this team through the OQs to get them to 3-2. I'm not as confident about them later on, especially in like, I don't know, in like a meta where bot lane is pretty important, and
That's
I'm
fair.
not entirely confident about them. I do think Meslo is probably the best player on this team though.
I
I
think
really
Meslo's a
like him.
huge pickup, and I do think Grapes that this will. I don't know. Are we putting him at 3 wins? Do we want to be blazing hot and put them at 4, or are we still?
No, I think that they're pretty solidly 3.
Okay, that's fair. I do think they're for what you said earlier too. I do think there's a pretty clear top 6 here, so it is kind of hard to put anyone else at 4.
Oh, I would just stick 2 teams at 2 and 3.
We do still have to stick 2 teams at 2 and 3. Grapes. And one of them, after Redbirds, is Lit Esports. They're my pick for 2 and 3. Look, I know some people are really high on
Oh,
this roster, and they do
I'm
have
I'm
some.
going to I'm like I'm not standing up for this,
You're not.
but
You're putting
no.
your foot down.
I'm putting my foot
You
down.
put your foot
Lit
down.
Lit Esports is going to be good, and I don't know if you want to kind of explain your take first, but go ahead.
I mean, okay, here's my take. First of all, big Munchie fan. Everyone in the committee loved Munchie. That needs to be said. Like everyone was like, Munchie is a great prospect, great player. I'm with that. However, this team, I think, across the board is filled with some unknowns or some average players, and that's why I'm just not sold. I think they could be really good and they could elevate themselves to a 3 and 2 for sure. But I just there's so much uncertainty surrounding this team for me that I think the consistents that are sort of listed above are gonna outweigh this team.
This team's ceiling is very high, Hawk, and
It
I
is.
think that that's very important to keep in mind. Let's take a look at their roster, and I can maybe explain my reasoning a little bit later. They have Livacious in the top lane, Munchie, Conveying, Sajet, and Chaye. Now, important to note, this team, all 5 of these players were in the native gaming tryouts, and I casted a lot of them and got to talk to a lot of the players with and hearing from some people within the native ecosystem, like these players were definitely kind of highly considered to be a member, um, to be like a part of native gaming, obviously.
Hmm.
Conveying, shout out talking in the chat, Vexo Esports, who is an OG team from UPL last year. Um, I think Munchie is really good. Livacious is the current top laner for Michigan State University, and I think was kind of going blow for blow with Jockey, who's another player that is ranked pretty high on this tier list. And Sajed was a very solid 80 carry as well. The one question mark was Chai for me on this team. He kind of had one day of tryouts, didn't look super great, but is a very new player, and I think can potentially grow a lot in this system. Coached by Pukar, who is
That's
of
true.
course formerly of Cincinnati Fear. So this is actually a team that if all the things click right for me, like they can go 4-1.
All right, Grapes. If you're putting your foot down, wait, 4-1. Whoa,
They,
hang
they
on.
could they could go 4-1. I don't think they do. I think probably some stumble happens at some point. I think that they're solidly 3-2, and I will be able to I'll be able to decide on another 2-win team in the next couple of seeds, I think.
All right, all right. If you're putting your foot down, I'm fine with putting Lit Esports at 3 wins, Grapes. But that brings us on now to our number 12 seed, UCI Esports. They were probably knocked down a full tier
Oh, we
just.
missed one. We missed one.
Oh, I'm sorry. You're
We
right.
missed
We
their
missed
team,
one.
which is third-party Super Sunshine Fruit Basket Warriors. They are the roster of Northwood University, who is currently competing in CLOL. If we take a look at their roster right now, it is Izo, RBM, Repi, Chrono, and Clyde. Now, important announcement for everyone who is still watching us here on the Salty Runback Twitch stream. If you are a fan of Super Sunshine Fruit Basket Warriors, if you are a fan of RBM, if you are a fan of Izo, if you're a fan of Helix, who put some of those hot takes in the tier list earlier. We're going to be covering all of their games on the Salty Runback Pod Twitch channel, starting Saturday at 10 a.m. Pacific. We can get into some of the matchups a little bit later, but just getting out of the way, one of the teams that is going to be battling for one of these spots, and I think, Hawk, they get in.
Yeah. I think they get into. I like this Super Sunshine team. I'm a big RBM fan back from the AOE days in 2021 summer. I covered a lot of their stuff, and I thought RBM was a really great player. Still is a really great player. Also, I picked Chrono in my NACLQ draft, so I have to stand my ADC. I think this team gets in for sure.
Interesting, because I had them ranked. I had them seated, I believe, 18th, which is not
Oh,
in the top
really?
16. And sorry, 17th. So right on the edge, and that was just kind of because a lot of the other teams kind of got in the way. However, I can see situations where other teams maybe could fall down, and I am feeling pretty confident, especially in RBM's kind of just like leadership as a whole.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Him combined with Clyde is going to be really interesting
Yeah,
to
Clyde
watch.
too.
Also,
Great player.
Izo kind of just plays like a rock in the top lane. And Keelix and a lot of the other people in the committee were talking very highly of Reppy and Chrono. I watched a couple of their CeeLo games. Actually, their HuFest qualifier games last year, when they were playing in some of the fall tournaments, and they look honestly pretty solid. They took Maryville to some pretty interesting situations in their qualifying bracket. So I think this is going to be I think it's going to be a cool roster to watch.
Yeah, I agree. All right, Grapes. Are we putting him at 3-2 or 2-3?
I'm sticking them at 3-2, as if you're down.
I'm down with 3-2 as well. I think that this team, I think this is one of those teams that has a lot of upside, and I think that is important.
I feel like they have a lot of upside and also not a lot of downside. I feel
That's
like
true too.
RBM can
Yeah,
probably carry a team through like at least the middle of the pack.
yeah.
And I think Reppy and Chrono have had enough time kind of playing together and with this Northwood team that they're gonna be all right.
I subscribe to that. All right. Now I spoiled it before. Keelik's probably moving him down a whole tier. Number 12, UCI Esports. This team, we probably should try to spend just a little bit more time on these rosters moving up as much as we want to talk about them. We have been going for quite a while, but UCI,
Yeah.
they have got Mike Young these days, as well as Gorica Grapes, and those are really the two names on this roster that stick out to me.
So taking a look at the UCI gaming roster, they have Elated, Mike Young, Cinnamon Bread, Gorka, and Light Pulse. So some players returning to UCI, some players coming back from a break from UCI in
Mm-hmm.
Mike Young,
Yeah.
and some other players kind of also joining this collegiate team who has been at the top of the table for a while. I think the interesting thing is Gorica Light Pulse. This is a bot lane that
Yep.
I really will subscribe to for the most part. Mike Young, I know, has had some kind of ups and downs ever since he has left the LCS system and a part of TSM. And so I'm not entirely convinced on him, but for the rest of the team, I definitely like them. Also, Elated was a top laner for Last Resistance, who's a team in UPL, as well as I believe a couple of other teams. But um, yeah, so kind of just like a kind of a decent top laner who has been part of UCI since the start of the school year.
So Grapes, my big thing with this team is I think there's no way that this team doesn't go at least 3-2 because, as you said, this bot lane is really spicy, and we basically I think Gorica alone is good enough to skill check worse ADCs because of his playstyle. Gorica is one of those ADCs that is not afraid to just destroy you in lane and never look back, and so we saw it last summer against teams that were in the main group stage. Gorica would just destroy them in lane, and that would be the game. So I think based on that alone, I have this team at 3-2.
Yeah, I'm thinking about maybe being one of the teams that we bump up, but I feel like every time UCI plays one of these qualifiers, they get unlucky
That's
somehow.
also
So
true. They
I think
were
that
the kings of going 2-3 last year. They went 3-2
yeah.
in the first one, and then they went 2-3, 2-3, 2-3, which is really unlucky
So I'm okay with sticking them at 3-2 for
for
I'm
now.
okay with sticking them at 3-2 for now. Yeah. Okay. Winthrop University. I have Winthrop actually as a team as one of the teams out at this
I do
point.
too. Okay. Wow, we're on agreement with that.
The main reason for this talk, I'm gonna just be very, very quick with this, and then you can get into why Winthrop potentially could be good. Is that Mobility is currently still playing for Evil Genius's Challengers right now. And that because of that, he is not on their roster.
Yeah.
And the sub that they have selected is Rapid, but I believe he's just going in as a sub for the team, and ZKG will be the bot lane starter for this team. But I do think Mobility is pretty good. But Ah, man, now that I think about it, I still think it's hard. But Hawk, what do you think about Winthrop here?
No, Grapes. I got to be honest. I think with ZKG and Kenji down at the bottom lane, I'm gonna be honest. I don't think Kenji is the player that he was when this team won CLOL. And I think ZKG is also just not that great. And especially if we're looking at a bot side focus meta, I think this bot lane could be a legitimate liability for Winthrop. I rated them lower than anybody else. I'm really worried for this team. I've not been impressed from what I've seen. And the biggest thing is I don't think that their top side of the map is talented enough to pick up the slack. It's sort of how I felt about the what was it? Was it the Northern Front Grapes?
Right.
Yeah, it was similar to how I felt about the Northern Front. I think they're gonna be a little bit better. Maybe, but I don't know. I think this bot lane is worse. So I'm feeling 2 and 3 personally. I don't. I know it's tough with Winthrop because we do like them, but
Yeah, and now that I'm looking at it, I don't see the rest of these teams going anywhere near
no.
like 2 and 3. So I think we're gonna have to move one of the 3 and 2 teams down at this point as well.
I think it's the Northern Front.
I I think this is really difficult. Um,
We can wait. I mean, hang on. Let me look at the seating. Is there anyone else? There's one
I
more that I could put down.
is it Godel?
It's Godel.
I believe in Godel more than the Northern Front, but I also think the Nameless could potentially be one of the teams out as well, and I'm gonna stick to that.
I mean, I think they could be, but I don't know. Let's do the team in between Godel and Winthrop first. We can cross this bridge when we come to it because maybe it's this team, Mirage, coming in at number 10. Grapes. We also felt that this team will probably be in a way one of those benchmark teams. Honestly, I don't think they're a team that falls. They have some pretty good pieces.
Okay, so Mirage has Barrack, Hyphy, Ariandel, Goodboy, and Pawkus. Um, this team overall just again kind of looks, as you said, Hawk, pretty standard. I
Yeah.
think that Barrack has had some good flashes on UCI in the past. Ariandel, kind of just like a solid roaming around mid laner who will never carry a game, but will help other people carry games. And I think the question now then about with that will be, you know, will the side lanes be able to carry in this game
Mhm.
in their games that Mirage plays? And I think Goodboy and Pockets are a bot lane that some people sleep on. I probably am sleeping on them a little bit, but I know you have a little bit of a higher opinion about them.
Especially Pawkus. I'm actually really, really high on Pawkus. I think Pawkus is a great support. Remember, Wildcard Aces made Proving Grounds as well as top 8 in Spring 2 off of the bot lane of Jeremy and Pawkus. Now, this is not to slight Jeremy at all, who ended up being quite the ADC player, but I think Pawkus was a huge part of the reason for that team's success. And again, it was off of exquisite bot lane play. And again, if we're looking at a bot side focus meta, I think the solo laners are good enough. Honestly, I'm not very high on Hyphy at all. But I think this bot lane will be excellent for Mirage, and I think that's enough for me. I think they're solidly a 3 and 2. And again, I am looking at different teams that would fall down.
Oh man, you know it's crazy. I think I have Godel at 4-1.
What? Whoa, that's a blatant fuck. All right, fuck whatever I just said. We're putting who did we just do? Mirage is going at 3 and 2. Grapes, I need the hot take right now.
Godel, I think is gonna surprise people. I think Trickster and Davemon are gonna look good. Detro will roam around with them well. Blacklist and Smalls, again, don't know too much about them, but they were on a team that played really, really close to a lot of really high level collegiate high level amateur teams in the summer split. And I can see a couple of other teams up here that might not, pan out at least in the open qualifier. So I have actually Godel surprising some people and Trickster and the rest of the guys bouncing up to 4-1.
I don't know, man. I see this team as Trickster and a bunch of other decent players, and I think that's enough for them to actually not make top 16. I'm so on the opposite side of you
Wow.
with this.
Wow. I think that their floor is definitely 2-3. I think if things don't click,
I think
they're
their floor
definitely
is
2-3.
1 and 4. Their floor. If we're talking like everything went horribly wrong, I could see this team not working. I could see Godel not working.
I think I like Trickster a lot think that's what we're
I
coming
think,
down
yeah,
to right now.
I maybe I rate Trickster a lot lower than a lot of other teams or a lot of the other analysts. I don't know. I think Trickster's a great jungler, but I don't see him as being. I see him as being a piece that could be added to any roster to make it good. I don't see him as being a piece that you build a roster around. But maybe that's just my own flawed perception. I don't know.
They're seeded 9th. I had them 8th. Hawk, you had them 13th.
I
So
had
you
them
think
13th.
even though that they're a top 16 team in your power rankings, you're not getting they're not getting out.
All
You
right.
just think there's too much variance here.
I think there's a lot of variance. Okay, here's what I'll say. I think I'll give you Godel, but then either the Northern Front or Super Sunshine, I think falls, or the
I'll take the
Nameless.
northern. I'll take the northern. I'll
The,
take the nameless, but I don't know if you want to take the nameless. I think Northern Front
I think Northern
also.
Front is definitely worse than Nameless.
I don't know. I ranked them higher, but I think that in terms. Okay, so let's look at it from this way
I'll,
because obviously we're kind of just arguing in circles right now. We have nameless kind of versus Northern Front in this way.
okay.
I think out of these, okay, so actually, I'll give it to you in this way. I think that Northern Front have a higher ceiling. I think that Nameless have a higher floor, and so because of that, I think I'll give Northern Front the unfortunate bounce out.
I think honestly, I think that's pretty valid looking at these teams as well. I think that the Northern Front is a team that really, if they come together, could be really good. But I also, that's how I feel about the Nameless. But the Nameless, I think just looking at the names on this team, they've shown more over the course of time. Do you think that's fair, Grapes?
Yep, let's stick him there.
You came up with a better compromise than me. I said if we nixed the Northern Front, I would have given you Godel at 4-1, but we're gonna do it this way. Oops, I'm having issues here.
So we're picking Godel at 3-2 then.
For now. But I'll be willing to negotiate this later
Because there's a couple teams that I think that up here that could definitely have some problems come open qualifiers.
That is fair. Is one of them going to be University of St. Trevor?
No, Trevor's 4-1.
I subscribe to that, actually. I subscribe to that a lot, especially for the fact that this is a team. So for those that don't know, University of St. Trevor, University of St. Thomas, it's the top side of the CELO. Well, no, it's Porsche and Kitsuo from the CELO winning team. Robbie Bob still in NACL, at least for the OQs. But they've got Heike Savage, who is still a great player. And then in the bot lane, they're coming in with
Aang and Dapshin.
Right.
So Dapshin, I think, is really good. He's
Yeah.
been on Wildcard. He's been on a couple of other people. A couple of other teams, sorry. Now kind of making his way to collegiate on one of the better collegiate teams in the nation. Of course, they won CELO last year. Not all their players are present, of course, with Robbie Bob still, I believe, subbing in with Evil Genius's challengers as is mobility. And so I think that could potentially be interesting. But I think Kitsuo and Savage as a mid-jungle duo is going to be a very different look than Robbie Bob and Kitsuo, but maybe an exciting one for this team.
Yeah, definitely. I definitely agree that this is just an exciting team, and I think the floor here, Grapes, is really what I'm looking at, and why I actually agree with you that they could be 4-1. I think the floor of this team is just gonna be so high. I think their players are individually very good. With the exception of Aang, but I think this team is gonna be fine across the board because their playstyle has never relied exclusively on an ADC to carry them.
And I'll say it right here, hashtag free Shogo.
Yes!
Don't know much about Aang,
We love
but
Shogo!
please let Shogo play in these tournaments. He's so good.
Look, Grapes, I do want to go off on this tangent just for a minute because I think it's fair to say that that Shogo playing in the NACL would make the region better, and Shogo should be here. But I'll get off the soapbox on that one.
Okay, let's move on to our next team, Team Ambition. This roster is a very interesting one as well. This is one of the more hyped ones coming in. They have Cozy, Sarcasm, Town, Aaron, and Pluto. Aaron Pluto, of course, from Grandview, Town from CLG Faith, Aaron also from CLG Faith, Cozy from Supernova, Slew, etc. And Sarcasm, former TSM trainee, has kind of bounced around a little bit. Was on Team Ambition last year and is on Team Ambition this year. Hawk, what do we think about this team?
So, Grapes, my take about this team is I think this team is pretty solid across the board. Yeah, that's it. I think this team is pretty solid across the board. I think they've got good players all around, some with higher ceilings than others. And I even though I actually ranked Team Ambition higher than UST, I think their solidness across the board will land them at 3-2, just because I don't expect them to beat the teams that are better than them, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think the top side of UST is very interesting, and I think Daption adds to that as well.
Yeah.
I feel like Team Ambition. I don't know. Maybe we're ranking UST too high, especially because we don't know their ADC very well.
I mean, maybe
Uh,
that is fair. I do kind of agree with that.
I just want some hot takes on this show, and maybe one of them is Godel Gamers at 4-1. What do you think?
All right, if you want to bring UST down and put Godel Gamers at 4-1, I'm fine to send it. I think because you know what,
I think that makes more sense. I think
Godel
that is a
Gamers,
better.
for what it's worth, even though I don't rate them nearly as highly as you, like, part of that reason was the variance, right? And so if we're sitting here and saying that that variance is a reason why that Godel Gamers could be bad, then maybe it's a reason they could be really good too.
Yeah, because I don't feel comfortable putting Ambition at 3-2 and also putting USD at 4-1. I think actually I'm okay with putting Ambition at 4-1 right now.
Really, because remember, we've only got 4 more 4-1 teams left, Grapes, and we have. I mean, look, all I'm gonna say is I think there are. Let me look
Go-
at the seedings here. There are 4 teams here that we will get hard flamed if we don't put it 4-1 to start.
Who cares about getting hard
I
flamed?
mean, yeah, that's true. That's true. All right, we'll put Team Ambition at 4-1 for now. How about that?
I think that's cool. I think Town can have some crazy moments. Cozy, I feel like Town and Cozy can look really bad and really good. Town. So I think that's an interesting one to take a look at.
Yeah, I do think I know Town came into the summer very hyped up by Myra on the reveal show. Shout out Myra. And had moments for sure, but the consistency wasn't really there. But I think that was also sort of the story of CLG Faith's team as well, with struggles with consistency. And I do think this Team Ambition team is, the pieces around Town are better than they were on Faith Grapes.
Still have Aaron, so
They still have Aaron, but I don't think Aaron was necessarily the issue with that team though. And so I'm excited to see what Town can do. But moving on, we're really getting into it, Grapes. Supernova, number 6 seed, 4-1.
I'll buy into that.
Dragoon,
I had Supernova.
man.
I had Supernova ranked very high. I think the top side is really good, and that actually might come into some of my other discussions later. But
Look, and I'm willing to concede to the other analysts that rated them a little bit lower that Supernova might struggle a little bit more on the bot side of the map, but I think people are sleeping on Azog and Chookies, man. I think Chookies in particular is a great support for UST. But so I think Chookies is a great support. I think Dragoon is the best top laner that's not named Tony Top in this whole thing. I think Hyper is a top 3 jungler in this whole thing. I think Chookies is probably top 3 support. I'm not really looking at them in
top
this whole thing.
3.
Yeah, I mean, like let's look. We got Winter, we got Rhino. Name me a better support than Chookies after them.
You know what? I'll give it to you for now, but I got my eye on you here.
All right. You can have.
I think Pluto is good. I think that Daption is good. I think that Light Pulse is pretty good. So in that range potentially.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
But I think this team. Look, I have them as my number 3. I think Supernova is going to be great. I really.
Oh, Zyko as well. Zyko is
True.
very good.
Zyko's pretty good. I would rate Chookies
Thank you,
higher
Trey.
than Zyko personally, but Zyko is a great support. Look, I mean, basically my thing is I think the side lanes. I'm actually like. Onat is the one I'm most concerned for, but as long as Onat can play for side lanes, I think the side lanes on this team will be excellent, Grapes, and I'm really excited about this team. And I would be willing to kick one of the other teams that people might not be happy about down to 3 wins if it means that Supernova gets to 4.
Yeah, I think they just have very solid players throughout. Onat is the one question mark.
Mhm.
And so that's kind of where I'm looking right now as maybe being a potential question mark. But also when you look at the rest of the mid lane pool, a lot of the top teams, kind of their quote unquote weakness is their mid lane, specifically Team Fish Taco with Comp 9, which we'll
That's
get to
true.
later, as
Yeah.
somebody that we don't know super well. Obviously, Messages is somebody who a lot of people have been hyping up, and I think that he's been very good, but also just like hasn't necessarily proven it on stage just yet. And so I think Supernova, if I, in my mind, Messages is better than Onat, right? But we have to kind of just see that before. And so I think that putting Supernova at 4-1 probably is okay, which gets us into some interesting territory here. So what do we have left? We have 5 teams left. That means that there's.
I'm
Did
just
we
gonna
do the math
say right
wrong?
now before we
Yeah,
get on to the next teams, Grapes. I think we need to move Team Ambition down to 3 wins because uh there's some teams here that I don't think are gonna go 3 wins.
my hot take is that I'm putting Maryville at 3-2 instead.
Really? All right, tell me why Maryville's going 3-2.
I think so. If you guys don't know, Maryville's roster is Niles, the Odd Orange, Get Back, Scary Jerry, and Zyko. I am very, very high on Zyko and Scary Jerry. I think they're very good. I think Niles and Odd Orange, if they are if they are correct, if they're playing really well, they are one of the best top jungle duos. I think Get Back is very solid as well. Um, but they have had some coaching changes over the past couple of weeks, and that is maybe where
That's
I
true.
am a little bit conf- a little bit concerned.
Yeah, and you know what I will say too, looking at, we're talking about the mid lane potentially be some of the weakness for some of these top teams. I do think that is the case for Maryville, but there's some of these teams at the top. Supernova, also the Tony Top team that we'll get to in a little bit. They have really great top sides of the map, and I actually do think that neutralizes a lot of the strength of this Maryville team. And Grapes, I'm willing to repent for B1 Niles. I'm fine. If you feel like Maryville's going 3-2, I'm okay with it because I actually could see this team struggling against some of the top teams because even though as high as I am on Scary Jerry and Zyko, I think they're awesome. I don't think they're gonna beat some of the best bot lanes here, and I think the same goes for Niles and Odd Orange.
I could also see Horizon potentially faltering, especially if we don't know much about the top side of the map. And so maybe I think one of those teams is where we have to put in this 3-win category,
So
if you know what I mean.
Grapes, I'm fine with going Maryville Horizon both at 3-2 here because then that leaves Tony Top, Native Gaming, and Fish Taco to distribute amongst 5 and 4.
Huh. Okay. Maybe we Godel is looking a little sus right now then. I don't know.
Total,
I feel like they're
total.
gonna be I feel like they're gonna be a surprising team, and we're doing some hot takes here, and I think that if things click, they go well.
I,
I think
I
Maryville. I hope they do well because I'm a big fan of all of their players, and
yeah.
I've been doing I did a lot of their games and stuff, but I feel like some of these teams have feelings that maybe Maryville might not reach, especially just due to some of the different like coaching changes that have happened for every like back and forth.
Look, I'm here for the hot take on Godel because Grapes, here's what happens. Either they go 4-1 and you're a profit, or they don't make OQ and no one cares. Like what if we get the whole thing right? That's boring, right? That's not good content. So I'm
I
here
see
for
Niles
it.
in the chat. Please flame us if you guys go 5-0, because I can definitely see a situation where you do that as well. But Um, I think that this is an interesting place to put things right now. And I actually want to talk about Horizon for just a quick second because I know we're running low on time, and also just like it's a team that a lot of people had hyped up. I think this is one of the biggest Scrimbucks teams of the entire
Yeah.
committee process. Um, and that is kind of why I am a little bit
Yeah.
hesitant on them. They have Yunbi and Sophisage, who I think are very, very good. They
Yes.
have King Nidhogg, who I'm a big fan of in terms of like watching him as a streamer. And I think he's very mechanically talented, and of course hasn't played too much competitive games, but I think can transition to that pretty well. Their top laner I know nothing about, and Dragonman Kim is a role swap, and I think
Yeah.
maybe they will take a little bit of time to maybe to get some of that competitive stuff like out of kind of shake off rust in a way. But I think if everything clicks for this team, and if Yunbi and Nidhogg really kind of connect as a duo, they can be really good. I think this is
Yeah.
another team that could go between that 5-0 and 3-2 mark.
I'm comfortable with Horizon at 3-2 Grapes. Look, I the middle three that you said, Nidhogg, Sophic Sage, and Yunbi, I think are all great. Also, DMK I think was a pretty good jungler, but again, don't know anything about the top lane. It is a role swap, and so based on that, I actually barely had them in my top 10 in my first seeding because I didn't feel strongly. But according to all the GMs, this team is smurfing scrims, and also apparently DMK is like a god tier shot caller, so they are smurfing on everyone. So that is what we've heard based on the selection committee. But Grapes, based on what we're looking at right here, I'm willing to not buy in. I'm willing to not drink the Kool-Aid here. I don't know.
I hope I'm wrong because I like a lot of the players.
I do like the players.
But I think that maybe in the first 5 games, some stuff goes wrong, especially because there's a lot of good top laners.
True.
Who,
Yeah.
we're gonna be mentioning a little bit later as well.
Yeah, I'm comfortable with Horizon Gaming at 3-2. I do think if people are watching the OQs, this is probably a team you should watch out for. Maryville, likewise, like these are two that I would look out for.
I feel like every time I every time I predict Maryville either to like do really good or like win anything,
that's
I always
facts.
curse- I
They let
always
me down
curse
on
them.
predictions
I
so much
always
last
curse
year.
them.
That
So I'm
yeah,
either hedging my bets or I'm reversing the curse. Either way,
it works.
hot takes coming in. That's just what I'm saying.
All right,
We have 3
Grapes.
teams left.
I think we should we should put our 5-0 and then fill out this tier list, and we can briefly talk about each of the rosters after. How do you feel
My
about
5
that?
and 0.
Who's our
is
5-0
To-
out of
My 5 and
TFT,
0.
Tony Top, and Native Gaming?
My 5 and 0 is Tony Top.
My 5-0. My 5-0 is Native. Tell me why it's Tony Top.
I think that they have a lot of very good players. Let's take a look at Doi and Tony Top. They are our number 3 seed. Their roster consists of Tony Top, obviously, Iconic, Sudsy, Levitate, and Snow 2. I think their bot lane looks good. I think Tony Top is probably one of the best players here. I think he was like a middle of the pack academy top laner last year, and that's going to be pretty interesting as well. Iconic obviously has been very good throughout his time both at Maryville, also Golden Guardians Academy. He had some pretty solid matches there as well. Sudsy was an amateur player who was very good on Revival back in 2021. Came back for about a couple of games in summer last year, and didn't have the best results, but I'm willing to kind of put that behind right now. And I
Winston
think
King of
Levitate,
Amateur.
yeah, and I
We
think
casted
Levitate
one of their
actually,
games.
we did cast their game. Scoop got a pentakill. Shout out.
Right.
But their bot lane here is Levitate and Snow 2. I think that I'm actually pretty high on both these players. I think that Levitate looked pretty good in native. It looked good in native tryouts against other players that are also like among the middle to like top of the pack of bot lanes. But I think they'll be fine, and it's just going to be like the top side that gets this team up.
So, Grapes, I hear you, but you talked about Scoop getting a pentakill, and here's my take is I think Iconic is great against junglers that are worse than him because of his playstyle, but Fnatic is not worse than him. I actually think Fnatic might be a little bit better than Iconic.
Oh,
And so,
hot
based
take.
on that, I think Fnatic also plays a very map control style, very based on facilitating lanes, dominating in the river, and not letting enemy junglers do what they want. And I think that's going to frustrate Iconic's playstyle a little bit. That's 1. 2, if Shocky is as good as people say he is, he will not get run by Tony Top. 3, Scooped is going to absolutely fucking destroy this bot lane. He is the best ADC here. I think Scooped is going to run Tony Top off the rift, and that's why I have Native Gaming number 1.
No, I don't want to be like I don't want this to become a recurring segment on our show. But you have Tony Top against Shocky. And they're both gonna play carries. And they're both going
Grapes,
to...
everyone's been telling me how good Shocky is for like the last week. Like, come on. He's got to be able to match up, right?
It's Tony Top.
I mean, yeah, Tony Top's amazing. Tony Top's amazing. Niall says Tony runs Shocky entire bloodline. I mean,
Iconic and Fnatic are pretty close. I think Sudsy
Takibon says they
and
simply just
Messages
don't know.
are
Twitch chat
interesting.
has opinions.
Hmm.
I think this comes down to, do we think Tony Top runs Shocky harder than Scooped runs the bot lane of
That's, I guess, the question, right?
because I think messages is going to be able to do fine into Sudsy, and I think I also would give Fan a little bit of an edge over Iconic, especially based on playstyle, which Fans is very much a very suffocating playstyle. So do you think Tony Top has the stuff to carry
I
up against a Fed scooped?
I do feel like native would be more consistent than Tony. I could definitely see a situation where like Tony Top's team just like randomly like kind of falls
Mm.
apart, whether that's
Or
due
Tony
to
Top
the
randomly
bot
goes
lane
10-0 or
or
something. I don't know, like 0-10, 10-0. I
yeah.
don't know.
It's also just like Sudsy is kind of been out of the league for a year or
That's true.
so that's interesting.
Oh wow,
Um,
everyone's really getting into the chat. The what if we Grapes? What if we put it to a chat poll? Can I do that? Do I have the power? It,
uh, sure.
I
Put
wait.
it to the chat poll. I feel like the chat
Is
has other opinions that we don't have.
that might only
So
be a an affiliate thing? Actually, now that I think about it.
yeah, it's okay.
Well, spam in chat. Tony Top or Native Gaming, and great.
I feel
We'll
like
do our.
they have a. I feel like chat has a pretty solid opinion, and that's because there's a lot of different. There's a lot of
There's a lot of
there's
allegiances. A lot
a
of
lot of native
allegiances at
players
play.
in here and staff. So
Sneezes picks option 3. What's this? Don't say Team Fish Taco. Grapes and I eliminated them already. All
I
right,
think
Grapes.
Team
What are we
Taco.
doing here? We flipping a coin? How are we doing this?
I'll stick native in there.
Stick a
I'll give it.
native?
I'll give it to you because I also seeded them first, and so I was trying to argue a little bit here and there, but at the end of the day, I am just a shill for different people. So that's where we're going.
Look, Grapes, you got to understand, Colomer's in the chat. I have to retain my status as his favorite of the duo. That is, who's really the shill here?
All right, let's talk about the other team, Team Fish Taco, before we wrap things
Yeah,
up.
before we.
Their team is Alorum, Dardoch, Comp 9, E-Red, and Winter. I feel like this team has a lot of very interesting pieces. What do you think, Hawk?
Yeah, I think this bot lane could be amazing. I've not seen a lot of E-Red, but people are really, really high on him. And I think Winter coming back, I think Winter's just straight up going to be one of the best supports here. Alorum will be as consistent as always in the top lane. He will skill check all of these low tier teams very easily. I think the big one is Comp 9 Grapes. We don't really know what to expect from Comp 9. And I think with how much veteran talent is on this roster, though, I don't think it'll matter. Like when you got Dardoch and Winter as your jungle support as a mid laner, I don't think there's any way you could sprint it even if you tried. That's my take on this team.
Comp 9, I think, played on AoE randoms before Leo came in 2021, so that's an interesting thing. He also was on a couple of other teams back in the day. Pretty experienced player. I think his Vladimir is pretty well known. So yeah, also was on Just randoms at the beginning of the year. So interesting team, I think, as a whole. And I'm very excited to see them play. Make sure to go to Smax's Twitch channel to watch them during the open
Right,
qualifiers.
true.
And so that is, I think, where we are gonna leave things off. I know that like we have some really crazy takes. I'm not gonna lie. I definitely like the way that we rank these teams is not the way that we seeded them. So
No,
uh,
and I think that's kind of good
and,
because this is gonna sound weird. Oh, go ahead, finish your point. Sorry.
oh yeah, just like in general, we mentioned March Madness. Like we have to like kind of assume we have to guess all the random shit that's gonna happen
Right.
because there's gonna be a lot of random shit that happens. I'm 99% sure it's not gonna be like this. Like there's gonna be
Yeah.
something else that we're not expecting. Maryville's gonna go like absolute DRX mode and just fucking go 5-0. Native is gonna like Zuby's gonna like I don't know attack Colomer's entire Wi-Fi network and they're gonna go 0-5. Like something will
Something's
go
gonna happen.
on. Something's gonna happen, and we have to try to predict who. It's very hard to do so, and so
Yeah.
we might have had some very interesting things that we are kind of trying to predict. Part of which maybe can boost our engagements on social media. Follow us on Twitter at Salty Runback Pod. But I think that it's really hard to predict, and
It is.
this is why I'm very excited to watch open qualifiers this weekend.
And grapes, I think it's so hard to predict too, and just we rank these teams differently than as we seeded them, but I think it's fair to say, as you said, we're sort of trying to account for some of like the just fucking randomness of OQs as we're doing this. But when we're seeding right, I think I speak for both of us, where that's sort of trying to account for least variance, purely strength of teams. Like, who do we think? What is the seeding? It's not necessarily a prediction of final standing. So this is like, well, if shit were to hit the fan a little bit, what could happen? You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
and again, purely strength of teams. Like I had Maryville fourth, you had them third. I
Yeah,
think you had them first at some
I
point.
had them first
Um,
at my early iteration, right?
and so it's always interesting to bring things up. We had teams in our top 16 that we had not making the bracket for various reasons. Um, and again, it just kind of goes down to who like maybe wins draft or like
True.
if one of the coaches like fucks up a ban
And it's
and
best
then
of
maybe
ones. There could just be like, again, we were talking about like, does Tony Top run Shockey hard enough? Like that could just happen to happen in the one game that we see. Like Tony Top could just solo kill Shockey 5 times in solo carry, but that that's probably not going to happen every game, right? Like you just don't know.
right. And so that's our tier list. We have one last thing to do because I know we've been here for very long. I'm very tired. I've been talking for way too long. Is that what we have to do is take a look at our first round matchups of the open qualifiers. Again, these will be starting Saturday, January 28th at 10 a.m. Pacific time. So that is very early in the morning if you are on the West Coast. It's going to be kind of the middle of the day for us on the East. Hawk and I again will be covering Super Sunshine Fruit Basket Warriors, the team that we are predicting to go 3-2, and I think we'll have a very exciting road to getting there. But let's take a look at some of these round one matchups, Hawk. What here do you find to be incredibly interesting? There's one right off the bat that I'm very excited to see the result of, but
Yeah,
I want to hear your thoughts first.
Yeah, so Grapes, naturally, I mean, at the bottom are going to be these really hype matchups, I think, just because that's where the seating is closer. But first of all, I think our Super Sunshine matchup up against Zenigma is going to be great. But for me, I'm looking at Lit versus Zuby's Kittens. I think that one's going to be a banger.
Yeah, I think that's an exciting one as well. It's kind of a lot of young players.
Lots of like unproven, but they've sort of played.
If anybody is if anybody wants to stream lit esports, please send me the link so we can watch them on the side because I'm excited to kind of see how those teams go. Another interesting one that I'm taking a look at is actually Enigma versus Third Party, which is another one that we're going to be casting. St. Clair
Yep.
versus Winthrop, the collegiate matchup that is going to be cool.
Northern Front
And
Nameless at the bottom. We were pretty on the fence about both those
Brother Friend
teams.
Nameless actually was the one that I originally thought of, but that's kind of just like the obvious, like it's towards the bottom, so we're going to have
Right.
to look at that one. But those were two of the teams that we were considering to have very interesting pieces that we think maybe could or could not perform. And I actually kind of taking a step back as we wrap the show, Hawk. Think that it's really I'm actually pretty happy with how these teams ended up getting seeded.
Yeah.
Uh, because I came into this, with the expectation that amateur is going to be weaker. Obviously, there are 6 teams that are playing in NACL that would have potentially had players that would be in this league last year, and then other people like Zamudo and Griffin and like Armeo and Darshan and I was gonna say Tony Top, but he's here now. Will is another option, another example that are kind of just not playing, and so this is um a very interesting thing to look at in terms of I was actually very happy with the fact that there are teams here that are not going to make it that I'm going to be sad aren't going to make it. And I
For
think I
sure.
think I was worried it would have been the other way around where I was going to be kind of like, oh, this team's really like we're going to have to watch this team in the group stage. But I actually feel like there's a lot of really exciting teams and even though the field might be weaker as a whole, like overall it's going to be still a good OQ.
Yeah, I think it is fair to say that this field is weaker, but I really I think I said this to you, Grapes, yesterday. Even though the field's weaker, I think the talent is very diluted this year amongst a lot of different teams, and that's a positive thing. I think that it's not just a bunch of really stacked rosters with sort of what was left that's gonna like pleb stomp these OQs. I think that there are some teams that all have amazing pieces. I think that there are some players that are probably going to really pop off that we don't know about yet or don't know a lot about yet. And I mean, Grapes, we put Godel at 4-1. There are some teams here that could be amazing. I I casted all 4 OQs last year. I was I was the OQ guy. And
OQ
I always loved that so much because watching the matchups unfold, telling my producers what teams I wanted to cover, what I wanted to see, and what I thought the fans would want to see was always so fun because, again, I sort of learned so much from that no-name game that we did and I against EGP, where we got to see some players that really were no-named. Geiger, I know you're in the chat right now. Like show their stuff up against a team that we expected to be amazing, that's what it's about in OQs, is getting to see some of these players pop off, because there are going to be some really good teams that go 2-3, and we're going to be really sad for them. Their only
Yeah.
16 can make it into the group stage, but that's the beauty of OQs. And again, I think this OQ is showing us that there's so much talent top to bottom in amateur that we kind of forgot was here, and even losing some of those players that are playing in NACL, some of those E-subs that are playing in NACL adds even more. Some of these players that are taking a split off, the ecosystem is still here, and now they have a shot. Some of these top teams, they're gonna have a shot at promotion up against NACL. There is a path forward. You don't just have to hope you get picked up by a better team. You can demote them yourself. No, but seriously, you could go and demote them
agree.
yourself, and that's awesome for the scene.
It's gonna be exciting. I think the promotion relegation tournament is actually going to be really cool, and obviously, the NACL teams are gonna have much better practice. But I could definitely see worlds where players here look really good, and we can see a really exciting tournament. So, make sure to stay tuned to all of the NACLQ Open qualifiers. All of the matches will be streamed each weekend in the 3-hour block before NACL starts, so at 10 a.m. Every Saturday and Sunday. The first 2 weeks, which include this weekend for the OQs and the first round of GSL, will have no official streams on the Rally Cry channel. But Hawk and I, as well as the NACLQ broadcast team, which is Summer, Alk Battery, Ravish, and myself, we'll be trying our best to give you as much coverage as possible and help get access to all of the matches that we possibly can, because obviously that's going to be very important in terms of keeping up with the scene and keeping up with some of the teams that could potentially make it into the next round of NACL in the summer split. And so
Definitely.
again, Smack Side will have a lot of information. Salty Runback Pod, we're going to be hosting Super Sunshine Fruit Basket Warriors. It's going to be a fruit related stream. I'll probably find some cool get up for the grapes as well. Got the purple rock in here, kind of works out in a way. But I think overall it's gonna be a pretty good time. I know we talked for a very long time. We'll recap everything in the next episode of Salty Runback, and I promise you it'll be way shorter than whatever the hell we were doing here.
Yeah, I mean, definitely it'll be shorter, but I mean, this was our chance, Grapes, to really break it down, talk for a long time about these teams live on the show. We hope that you all enjoyed. For those of you that don't know who we are, by the way, my name is Hawk. That is Grapes. He's an NACLQ caster. I'm a freelance caster as well, and I make content around the scene. Follow us both on Twitter. Our Twitters are in the title of the stream, at HawkCast on Twitter, at Speedy Grapes on Twitter. Follow the podcast at Salty Runback Pod on all platforms: Twitter, Spotify, Apple Music, and YouTube, as well as here on Twitch. Drop us a follow. So many of you followed tonight. So many of you watched tonight. We really appreciate the support. Catch us doing the Super Sunshine games on Saturday and Sunday, starting at 1 p.m. Eastern, 10 a.m. Pacific. I'll be joining a little late because I'll be getting off CB-LOL, but Grapes will be holding down the fort until I get there, and I'm sure that stream will be so much fun. We're excited to watch Super Sunshine show their stuff. And hey, we had a lot of hot takes on this stream, but at the end of the day, if you don't agree with some of what we said, you could take it with a grain of salt. I've been Hawk, that's been Grapes, and we've been Salty Runback.